As you lie down to rest, feel the weight of your body gently sink into the softness beneath you. The night stretches above, vast and serene, a quiet reminder of Allah's mercy. This moment of stillness is a gift, a brief, peaceful surrender to the care of Al-Wakeel, the Trustee. Let your heart release the burdens of the day, knowing that all is in His hands. Just as the world sleeps in trust, so too can you rest, embracing the tranquility of submission. Know that in the stillness of the night, when all is quiet, Allah's mercy is all-encompassing, and you, in this moment, are safe under His watchful gaze. Let your breath soften, your heart settle, and trust in the peace that comes with surrender. Prophet Muhammad's life is a journey that transcends time and geography, leaving an indelible mark on the world. Born in 570 CE in Mecca, he grew from an orphaned child into a prophet whose teachings would reshape societies, governments, and individual lives across the globe. His message, rooted in justice, mercy, and unity, continues to guide over 1 billion people today. This story begins with his early years, where the foundations of his character were laid. From there, we will follow the path that led him to his prophetic mission and the enduring legacy he left behind. The story of Prophet Muhammad begins in the heart of Arabia, in a time when Mecca was a bustling trade hub and a center of cultural and religious significance. Muhammad was born in 570 CE to Abdullah and Amina, members of the respected Hashim clan of the Quraysh tribe. However, his life was marked by hardship from the very start. His father, Abdullah, passed away before he was born, leaving him fatherless. When he was just 6 years old, his mother, Amina, also died, leaving him an orphan. In a world where family and tribe provided security, young Muhammad faced a life of vulnerability and uncertainty. Without his parents, Muhammad was taken in by his grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, who cared for him until his death when Muhammad was 8. At that point, he was placed under the care of his uncle, Abu Talib, who was a merchant. It was through his uncle's guidance that Muhammad was introduced to the merchant world. He travelled with Abu Talib on trading trips to places like Syria, where he encountered different cultures and people, gaining a wealth of experiences that would later shape his understanding of justice, fairness, and humanity. These trips, though challenging, allowed Muhammad to observe a range of social structures, interactions, and economies that were very different from the tribal customs of Mecca. The exposure to the wider world helped him develop a nuanced view of human nature, social dynamics, and the importance of ethical business practices, all of which would be central to his later teachings. Growing up in these circumstances, Muhammad developed a deep sense of empathy and integrity. As he matured, he became known for his honesty and reliability. His Tanawwal contemporaries even gave him the title Al-Amin, meaning the trustworthy, recognizing his impeccable character and trustworthiness in business and personal matters. These qualities were not simply byproducts of his upbringing, but reflections of a moral compass that guided his every action. His innate honesty and uprightness were evident in his dealings with both friends and strangers, gaining him a reputation that would become an essential asset in his future mission. These years were pivotal, as they not only shaped his character, but also set the stage for his later leadership. By the time he reached his early 20s, Muhammad had become a well-respected member of the Meccan community. His reputation as a fair and honest merchant caught the attention of Khadija, a wealthy and respected businesswoman in Mecca. She was impressed by his integrity and entrusted him with the management of her trading caravan. Muhammad's success in handling her business led to a deeper partnership, and their business collaboration eventually blossomed into a marriage. Khadija, who was 15 years older than Muhammad, was not only a wealthy widow, but also a woman of immense dignity and wisdom. She became an emotional and intellectual anchor for Muhammad, offering him the support and encouragement he needed in the years ahead. Their marriage was one of mutual respect, love, and shared values, providing Muhammad with a sense of stability and a foundation for his prophetic mission. It was during this period of personal and financial success that Muhammad began seeking deeper meaning and clarity about the world around him. Despite the comfort and success he had attained, he felt a growing sense of dissatisfaction with the moral decay he witnessed in Mecca. The city was deeply entrenched in polytheism, idol worship, and social injustices, where the rich exploited the poor and the powerful oppressed the weak. Muhammad began to retreat to the cave of Hira, located outside Mecca, to meditate and reflect on life's great mysteries. These periods of solitude were significant, as they set the stage for the divine revelation that would change the course of history. Muhammad's time in the cave, seeking answers to the questions that plagued him, reflected his deep inner turmoil and yearning for spiritual clarity. At the age of 40, after years of reflection and seeking understanding of the world, Muhammad had a profound spiritual experience in the cave of Hira. It was there, in the stillness of the desert, that he received his first revelation from the angel Gabriel. This moment marked the beginning of Muhammad's mission as the final prophet, and it was in the solitude of the cave that he first heard the divine call that would forever alter his life and the future of humanity. The event was both overwhelming and transformative, initiating a journey that would lead him to challenge the entrenched beliefs and power structures of his time. The significance of Muhammad's early life lies not just in the hardships he faced, but in how these experiences shaped his moral character. Growing up without parents, learning the value of honesty and trust through his business dealings, and contemplating life's deeper truths during his retreats, all laid the groundwork for the profound wisdom and guidance he would later offer the world. His early life teaches us that even in the most difficult circumstances, one can grow and develop the inner strength necessary to become a force for positive change. The foundations laid during these formative years would be tested and expanded in the years ahead, as Muhammad embarked on his mission to bring the message of monotheism, justice, and equality to the world. Muhammad's life took a profound turn when, at the age of 40, he retreated to the cave of Hira, located on the Mountain of Light outside Mecca, seeking solitude and spiritual clarity. It was during these moments of reflection that he would receive the first revelation from Allah, an event that would mark the beginning of his prophetic mission. The quiet of the cave, far removed from the hustle and bustle of Mecca, offered Muhammad a moment of peace in which to contemplate life's great mysteries. Little did he know, the serenity of this retreat would soon be shattered by an event that would change the course of history. As Muhammad meditated, seeking answers to his questions about the world, the angel Gabriel, appeared before him. In a voice that was both commanding and powerful, the angel instructed Muhammad to read or recite the word Iqra, which means both read and recite in Arabic. Muhammad, confused and terrified by the sudden presence of an otherworldly being, responded, "I am not a reader." The angel repeated the command 3 times, each time pressing Muhammad with an urgency that left him overwhelmed. The weight of the words, the force of the angel's presence, and the depth of the message left Muhammad speechless and fearful. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced, and the physical and emotional impact of the event was profound. Muhammad felt as if his chest was being constricted, as if the very essence of his being was being pressed upon by an immense force. He had no clear understanding of what was happening, and a deep sense of dread gripped him as he stumbled out of the cave, unsure of what to make of the encounter. Shaken, Muhammad hurried back to Mecca, feeling the weight of the experience and the fear that something had changed within him. He was disoriented and struggling to understand the meaning of what had just transpired. In his vulnerable state, he sought refuge in the one person he trusted most, his wife, Khadijah. He found her at home, and with trembling hands and a racing heart, he recounted the terrifying experience he had just encountered in the cave. His voice, filled with anxiety and confusion, echoed his inner turmoil. Khadijah, ever supportive and calm, listened to him with great care. She recognized the seriousness of the moment and understood that this was no ordinary experience. She comforted him, assuring him that he was not losing his mind. She said, "Allah would not humiliate you. You are kind to your family, you speak the truth, and you are generous to the poor. This is a great honor." Seeking further counsel, Khadijah took Muhammad to see her cousin, Waraka bin Naufal, a Christian scholar who was well versed in the scriptures. Waraka had spent many years studying the ancient revelations of the Jewish and Christian faiths, Upon hearing Muhammad's description of the event, Waraka's face turned pale and he exclaimed, "This is the same angel who came to Moses. You are the prophet of this people, just as Moses was a prophet to the children of Israel." Waraka's recognition of the divine messenger as Jibril reassured Muhammad, though the fear and uncertainty still lingered. The Christian monk's words confirm that this was not a delusion, but a divine calling. Waraka's words also shed light on the weight of the responsibility that Muhammad was about to bear. The message he had received was not just a personal experience, it was a call to a greater mission, one that would impact not only his life but the lives of countless others. Khadija's steadfast support, coupled with Waraka's affirmation, helped calm Muhammad's nerves and provided him with the reassurance he needed to accept the gravity of his calling. He was not alone in this, and there were those who would guide him through the uncertainties that lay ahead. With the burden of fear now somewhat lifted, Muhammad began to contemplate the meaning of his mission. He understood that this was the beginning of something far greater than he could have ever imagined. The first revelation, with its terrifying intensity and overwhelming power, marked the beginning of Muhammad's prophetic journey. It was the start of a new chapter in his life, one that would take him from being a respected merchant to a leader and a messenger of the divine. The initial fear and confusion Muhammad experienced were natural reactions to the magnitude of the task he was called to undertake. But it was also a pivotal moment in his spiritual awakening, one that would lead him to a deeper understanding of his purpose. As we move into the next chapter, we will explore how Muhammad's mission began to unfold in the days and weeks following his first revelation. The immediate reaction in Mecca would not be one of acceptance, but of rejection and hostility from the leaders of the Quraysh tribe. Yet, despite the opposition, Muhammad's message would begin to resonate with a growing number of followers, setting the stage for the challenges that lay ahead. After receiving the first revelation, Prophet Muhammad's life was irrevocably altered. The immediate reaction to his message, however, was not one of acceptance, but of resistance. In the early years of his prophethood, Muhammad faced immense challenges. His message of monotheism, social justice, and moral righteousness clashed with the polytheistic beliefs and corrupt practices of the Quraysh, the ruling tribe in Mecca. His public declarations that the idols worshipped in the Kaaba were false and that there was only one God threatened the very foundation of the Quraysh's power and economic prosperity. Initially, Muhammad began his mission quietly, preaching to his close family and friends. His wife Khadija was the first to believe in him, followed by other trusted companions such as Ali ibn Abi Talib, his cousin, and Abu Bakr, his close friend. These early followers, though few in number, were steadfast in their faith. The message Muhammad brought was one of equality, justice, and compassion. It resonated deeply with those who were marginalized in Meccan society, those who were poor, enslaved, or oppressed. As the years passed, however, Muhammad's message began to reach a broader audience. He spoke in public, encouraging people to abandon their idol worship and embrace the oneness of God. His teachings called for the fair treatment of women, orphans, and the poor, which was in stark contrast to the exploitation that was rampant in Meccan society. These radical ideas angered the Quraysh elites, who saw Muhammad's growing influence as a direct threat to their social and economic order. The Quraysh's response to Muhammad's message was swift and severe. Initially, they tried to ignore him, hoping that his ideas would die out on their own. But as his followers grew in number, the Quraysh realized that they needed to act. They began to use more aggressive tactics to silence him. The first strategy was to question Muhammad's credibility. They called him a liar, a madman, and a sorcerer, trying to discredit him in the eyes of the public. They spread rumors and used ridicule in an attempt to undermine his message. When these efforts failed to stop the spread of Islam, the Quraysh resorted to more direct forms of persecution. The early Muslims, many of whom were from the lower classes of Meccan society, were subjected to physical violence, social ostracism, and economic sanctions. Some were tortured in an attempt to force them to renounce their faith. Bilal, one of the first converts to Islam, was severely punished for his belief. He was tied to the hot desert sands and subjected to brutal torture, all because he refused to abandon his faith in the one true God. Despite these harsh conditions, Muhammad's followers did not waver. They believed in the truth of his message, and many were willing to endure great suffering for the sake of their faith. During this period, the early Muslim community became more tightly bonded. The trials they faced together helped solidify their commitment to Muhammad and his message. Muhammad himself endured the rejection and persecution with remarkable patience and perseverance. Though he suffered emotionally from the rejection of his own people, he remained steadfast in his mission, confident that his message was divinely ordained. The growing tension between Muhammad and the Quraysh was evident, but it was during this time that some of the Quraysh began to question their own positions. A few of the influential members of the tribe began to secretly listen to Muhammad's teachings, moved by the justice and wisdom in his words. Among them was Abu Bakr, who became one of the Prophet's closest supporters and a key figure in the early Muslim community. Abu Bakr's unwavering faith and leadership would play a crucial role in the survival of Islam in the face of fierce opposition. As the persecution escalated, some Muslims began to seek refuge in other lands. The first migration, known as the Hijra to Abyssinia, occurred when a group of Muslims fled to the Christian kingdom of Abyssinia in modern-day Ethiopia to escape the harsh treatment in Mecca. This migration was a moment of relief for the Muslims, as they were granted asylum by the Christian king Negus, who recognized the truth of their message and offered them protection from the Quraysh. Though the migration provided a temporary respite, it also deepened the divisions between the Muslims and the Quraysh, further polarizing the situation. Amidst these hardships, Muhammad continued to preach, and his message began to attract more followers. His moral integrity and unwavering commitment to justice inspired those who were searching for truth in a world filled with oppression and inequality. The early years of prophethood laid the foundation for the growing strength of the Muslim community, even as it faced immense opposition from the powerful elites of Mecca. As the persecution of the Muslims in Mecca intensified, the Quraysh grew increasingly concerned about the threat posed by Muhammad's teachings. The ruling elite feared that their control over the city's religious and economic systems would be undermined. The more they tried to silence Muhammad, the more they realized that his message had struck a deep chord with the people, and his influence was spreading beyond their control. The tensions between Muhammad and the Quraysh reached a breaking point, setting the stage for the eventual migration to Medina. This migration, which would come to be known as the Hijra, would mark a turning point in the history of Islam, not only because it represented a physical relocation, but because it also symbolized the transformation of the Muslim community from a persecuted minority in Mecca to a political and spiritual force in Medina. As the message of Islam began to spread throughout Mecca, the Quraysh leadership grew increasingly alarmed. The Prophet Muhammad's call to worship only one God and reject the idols in the Kaaba posed a direct challenge to the socio-political structure of Mecca, which was heavily reliant on the pilgrimage trade associated with the worship of these idols. For the Quraysh, Muhammad's message was not just a religious threat but an economic and political one as well. The growing influence of Islam, particularly among the marginalized and lower classes, was undermining their traditional power and privileges. As a result, the Quraysh tribe escalated their persecution of Muhammad and his followers, seeking to crush the movement before it could gain further ground. Initially, the persecution was subtle. The Quraysh tried to discredit Muhammad by calling him a madman, a sorcerer, and a liar. They spread rumors and engaged in character assassination to undermine his credibility in the eyes of the public. Yet, when these efforts failed to sway the people, they resorted to more severe methods. The early followers of Islam, most of whom were poor, enslaved, or otherwise disenfranchised, found themselves the prime targets of this campaign. The Quraysh sought to silence Muhammad's message by making life unbearable for his followers. The first wave of persecution involved economic and social boycotts. The Quraysh imposed a total boycott on the Muslims, cutting them off from trade and social interactions. This was a strategic move designed to isolate the Muslims and break their resolve. Muslims who were once respected members of society were now shunned by their own tribes. They were denied access to markets, forced to endure hunger, and faced with the constant threat of being ostracized from their families. The boycott, which lasted for several years, was a devastating blow to the early Muslim community, but it also revealed the strength of their faith and unity. Despite the hardships, they refused to abandon their belief in the one true God. As the boycott intensified, the Quraysh turned to more direct forms of violence and harassment. The persecution of the Muslims was brutal and unrelenting. Many of the early converts to Islam such as Bilal, Sumaya, and Kebab, were tortured in unimaginable ways. Bilal, a former slave, was dragged across the hot desert sands, his body covered in burns, as the Quraysh demanded he renounce his faith. His captors placed a heavy stone on his chest and left him to suffer in the sun, but Bilal refused to give in. His cries of Ahad, Ahad, God is one, became a symbol of resilience and unwavering faith, and his torturers, unable to break his spirit, eventually relented. Sumaya, another early convert, suffered a similar fate. She was speared to death by one of the Quraysh for refusing to abandon her faith. Her martyrdom became a powerful symbol of the sacrifices Muslims were willing to make for their belief in the oneness of God. The torture and martyrdom of these early followers served not only to deepen the resolve of the Muslim community, but also to garner sympathy from outsiders, who began to question the cruelty of the Quraysh leaders. For Muhammad, the persecution of his followers was deeply painful. As a leader, he was filled with anguish at seeing those he loved and trusted suffering for their faith. However, his commitment to the mission never wavered. He continued to preach the message of Islam, even in the face of opposition and violence. His resolve became even stronger as he witnessed the courage and devotion of his followers. He saw in them the future of Islam, and he knew that their suffering was a test of faith that would ultimately strengthen the community. Despite the increasing hostility from the Quraysh, Muhammad's message continued to gain traction, especially among the marginalized members of society. The more the Quraysh persecuted the Muslims, the more determined the believers became. This tension culminated in the decision by some of Muhammad's followers to migrate to the Christian kingdom of Abyssinia, where they could practice their faith freely. The first migration, known as the Hijrah to Abyssinia, was a temporary escape, but it highlighted the growing divide between the Muslims and the Quraysh. The Muslim refugees were welcomed and protected by the Christian king Negus, who saw in their message a truth that transcended religious boundaries. Meanwhile, the persecution continued in Mecca, with the Quraysh leaders meeting frequently to devise ways of silencing Muhammad once and for all. As the physical and psychological toll of the persecution mounted, the situation in Mecca grew increasingly unbearable for the Muslims. They were now facing not only economic and social hardship, but also the threat of death. The oppressive atmosphere made it clear that a decisive change was needed to preserve the safety and future of the Muslim community. The situation reached a breaking point when the Quraysh, unable to stop the spread of Muhammad's message through force or manipulation, began to consider a more permanent solution, removing Muhammad from Mecca entirely. They attempted to negotiate with him, offering him wealth, power, and even a prominent position within their society, if only he would abandon his mission. Muhammad refused. The Quraysh then resorted to extreme measures, and it became evident that the only way to protect the lives of his followers and continue the message of Islam was to leave Mecca. This marked the beginning of the decision that would change the course of Islamic history, the migration to Medina, known as the Hijrah. The migration was not merely a physical escape, but a pivotal moment in the formation of the Muslim community. It marked the shift from persecution to establishment, from oppression to freedom, and set the stage for the creation of the first Islamic state. The migration to Medina, known as the Hijrah, stands as one of the most transformative events in the history of Islam. This pivotal moment marked the end of the early years of persecution in Mecca and the beginning of a new chapter for Muhammad and his followers. The decision to migrate was not taken lightly, but as the oppression in Mecca escalated, it became clear that moving to Medina was the only viable option to preserve the future of the Muslim community and continue spreading the message of Islam. As the persecution intensified and the Quraysh sought to eliminate Muhammad and his followers, the situation in Mecca became increasingly untenable. The Muslims were under constant threat, and many of them had already migrated to other regions, such as Abyssinia, to escape the harsh conditions. For those who remained in Mecca, the pressure mounted, and the Prophet Muhammad, knowing that his followers were at risk, decided it was time for the community to seek a safe haven where they could practice their faith freely. Medina, then known as Yathrib, was a city north of Mecca with a growing population of people dissatisfied with the existing tribal leadership. The tribes of Abuez and Khazraj, two of the main tribes in Medina, had been engaged in a long-standing feud, and they saw in Muhammad a potential unifier who could bring peace to their city. Over time, the people of Medina had heard about Muhammad and his teachings, and many of them were eager to invite him to their city, where they hoped his leadership would resolve their internal conflicts. In the year 622 CE, a group of men from Medina came to Mecca and pledged allegiance to Muhammad, offering him their support and protection. This event, known as the Pledge of Aqaba, was a critical turning point. The Medinan delegation swore to support the Prophet and promised to welcome him and his followers into their city. Upon receiving this pledge, Muhammad made the decision to leave Mecca. The migration was not only a physical move, but a deeply symbolic one, marking the establishment of a new base for the Islamic community. The Quraysh, realizing that their power over Muhammad was slipping, planned to kill him before he could leave. They conspired to send a group of assassins to kill Muhammad in his home. However, Muhammad, with divine guidance, narrowly escaped the plot. He instructed his cousin Ali to stay behind and sleep in his bed to mislead the attackers, while he and his close companion Abu Bakr secretly left Mecca under the cover of darkness. The journey was fraught with danger. Muhammad and Abu Bakr hid in the cave of Thor for 3 days, evading pursuit by the Quraysh's search party. During this time, they were protected by God's divine intervention. The search party came dangerously close to the cave, but a miraculous event occurred. A spider spun a web over the entrance, and a pigeon laid eggs, making it appear as though the cave had been undisturbed for some time. This divine protection assured the two men that they were safe as they continued on their journey. After 3 days, Muhammad and Abu Bakr resumed their journey, travelling by foot and relying on the guidance of their trusted guides. The journey from Mecca to Medina took several days, and during this time, the Muslim community in Medina eagerly awaited their arrival. As Muhammad and his companion approached Medina, they were greeted by a jubilant crowd. The people of Medina came out to welcome the Prophet and his followers, and the streets were filled with cheers of Allahu Akbar, God is great. This warm reception marked the beginning of a new era for Islam. The arrival in Medina was not only a moment of physical safety, but also the start of a new political and social order. The first task upon arrival was to establish a place of worship, and so Muhammad ordered the construction of the first mosque in Medina, the Masjid al-Quba. This mosque became a center for prayer, community gatherings, and spiritual growth. Muhammad's arrival in Medina also marked the establishment of the Constitution of Medina, a groundbreaking document that defined the rights and responsibilities of the various tribes and religious groups in the city. The Constitution established principles of mutual cooperation, respect, and protection, laying the groundwork for the first Islamic state. The significance of the hijrah was not only in the physical relocation, but in the transition from being a persecuted minority in Mecca to forming a unified community in Medina. The migration allowed Muhammad to shift from being a persecuted prophet to a political leader who could now govern and guide his followers. In Medina, the Muslim community began to thrive, and their influence began to grow, both spiritually and politically. The migration allowed Islam to establish its roots and gave the followers of Muhammad the space and safety to practice their faith without fear of persecution. As the new Muslim state in Medina began to take shape, the Quraysh in Mecca realized that their efforts to stop Muhammad had only made his message stronger. The migration to Medina marked the beginning of a series of events that would eventually lead to the conquest of Mecca. The political and military dynamics of the Arabian Peninsula were shifting, and Muhammad's leadership and the unity of the Muslim community in Medina became a powerful force that could no longer be ignored. With Muhammad's migration to Medina, the seeds of the first Islamic state were sown. What had begun as a small, persecuted group of followers in Mecca was now becoming a unified community, bound together not just by faith, but by a shared vision of justice, cooperation, and mutual respect. The Hijrah had transformed the trajectory of the Muslim movement, and in Medina, Muhammad had the opportunity to lead not only as a prophet, but also as a political and social leader. The challenges of governing a diverse city, where multiple tribes and religious groups coexisted, required Muhammad to implement a new model of governance that prioritized unity and fairness. Upon his arrival, one of Muhammad's first actions was to establish the Masjid al-Nabawi, the Prophet's Mosque. This mosque would serve as the spiritual heart of the Muslim community in Medina. a place not just for prayer, but for the community to come, together, engage in social affairs, and receive guidance from their leader. The mosque symbolized the beginning of a new social order, one that was rooted in the Islamic principles of equality and brotherhood. It was not just a place of worship, but a center for learning, social interaction, and leadership. The Constitution of Medina, another crucial step in the formation of the Muslim state, was a groundbreaking document that defined the rights and responsibilities of all the people in Medina, including Muslims, Jews, and other tribal groups. Muhammad recognized the importance of creating a sense of shared purpose and mutual protection among the various groups living in Medina. The constitution established agreements of cooperation, peace, and justice, ensuring that the different groups would respect one another's rights and protect the city from external threats. This document became a cornerstone of Islamic governance, as it emphasized the importance of unity within diversity. The Constitution of Medina addressed several key issues: the protection of individual rights, the distribution of resources, the protection of the weak, and the importance of upholding justice. It also outlined the rules for cooperation in times of war and peace. By creating a social and political framework that ensured the safety and well-being of the entire community, Muhammad was able to build a cohesive society that transcended tribal loyalties and religious affiliations. The concept of ummah, a unified community of believers, was firmly established, and the foundations of the first Islamic state were now in place. As the Muslim community began to grow, Muhammad's role as both a spiritual leader and a political head of state became increasingly significant. The dynamics of leading a state required a delicate balance between his spiritual mission and his political responsibilities. On one hand, he was the final messenger of God, guiding his followers in matters of faith, morality, and worship. On the other hand, he was a statesman, responsible for the governance, security, and social cohesion of a growing and diverse city. His leadership required wisdom, patience, and the ability to navigate complex political situations while maintaining a strong moral compass. One of the major challenges Muhammad faced in Medina was dealing with the growing opposition from the Quraysh in Mecca. The Quraysh, unable to accept the loss of control over Mecca, saw Muhammad's growing influence as a threat to their power. This led to the first military confrontations between the Muslims and the Quraysh. These battles, such as the Battle of Badr, were not merely physical confrontations, but also political statements. Muhammad's leadership was tested not just in the mosque or in spiritual matters, but in the battlefield as well. He had to lead his followers with both courage and integrity, ensuring that the principles of justice and righteousness remained central to their actions, even in the heat of conflict. In addition to his role as a political leader in Medina, Muhammad also focused on building a strong and just society. He advocated for the fair treatment of all people, regardless of their social status, and he worked tirelessly to ensure that the rights of women, orphans, and the poor were protected. Islam's teachings of charity and compassion became central tenets of the community's way of life, and the establishment of the first Islamic state allowed for the practical implementation of these values. The Muslim community in Medina became a model of social justice, where the needs of the weak were given priority, and the strong were expected to protect and support the vulnerable. The challenges of leading a diverse community also required Muhammad to foster cooperation and understanding between different groups. In Medina, there were Jews, Christians, and polytheists, each with their own traditions and beliefs. Muhammad's message of religious tolerance, though it emphasized the oneness of God, also recognized the value of peaceful coexistence. While the Constitution laid out the framework for mutual respect and protection, there were still moments of tension between the different groups. Muhammad's leadership was crucial in managing these relationships, ensuring that the integrity of the community remained intact while also respecting the diversity of its members. The social reforms introduced by Muhammad in Medina were groundbreaking for their time. He advocated for the protection of women's rights, their right to own property, and their right to participate in social, economic, and political matters. The status of women in the new Islamic society was elevated, and they were given rights that were unheard of in pre-Islamic Arabia. The early Muslim community in Medina provided a glimpse of what an egalitarian society could look like, where the principles of justice, mercy, and equality were paramount. The Hijra and the subsequent formation of the Muslim community in Medina marked the beginning of a new chapter in Islamic history. Muhammad's leadership not only transformed the spiritual landscape, but also laid the foundations for a political and social order that would eventually spread across the Arabian Peninsula and beyond. The Battle of Badr, fought in 624 CE, stands as one of the most defining moments in the early history of Islam. This pivotal confrontation between the fledgling Muslim community in Medina and the Quraysh of Mecca was not just a battle of armies, but a clash of ideals, a test of faith, and a manifestation of divine support. In many ways, the battle at Badr marked the transition of Muhammad's leadership from that of a spiritual guide to that of a political and military leader, with profound implications for the future of Islam. The origins of the Battle of Badr can be traced back to the growing tensions between the Quraysh and the Muslims. After the migration to Medina, the Quraysh had increasingly seen Muhammad's community as a political and military threat. Though the Muslims were no longer in Mecca, the Quraysh feared that the Muslims would soon pose a challenge to their dominance over the Arabian Peninsula. The Quraysh had already attempted to stamp out the message of Islam through economic sanctions and persecution, but the migration to Medina only galvanized the Muslims further. The Quraysh, in retaliation, had been staging raids on the Muslim caravans, seeking to weaken their economic standing. It was during one such raid, aimed at intercepting a Quraysh caravan traveling from Syria to Mecca, that the stage was set for the Battle of Badr. The Muslims had learned of the caravan's route, and Muhammad, recognizing the opportunity to strike a blow against the Quraysh, led a group of his followers to intercept it. The Muslims had no intention of starting a large-scale battle, but the Quraysh, alerted to the Muslims' movements, gathered their own forces in response. The confrontation soon escalated into a full-scale battle, and what began as a small skirmish became a decisive clash between the two sides. The Muslim forces, though vastly outnumbered, remained resolute. Muhammad, with divine guidance and strategic foresight, positioned his forces near a well at Badr, a strategic location that would give them an advantage over the Quraysh. The battle began with both sides engaging in a series of skirmishes, but it soon became clear that the Muslims, despite their smaller numbers, were gaining the upper hand. The Quraysh, accustomed to overwhelming force, were taken by surprise at the unity, discipline, and conviction of the Muslims. As the battle raged on, the tide of the conflict turned in favor of the Muslims, with several key Quraysh leaders falling in the fight. One of the most significant aspects of the Battle of Badr was the spiritual and moral lessons it imparted to the Muslim community. For the Muslims, this victory was not just a military triumph, but a divine affirmation of their faith and commitment to the message of Islam. Despite being outnumbered 3-1, the Muslims attributed their victory to God's intervention and the strength of their belief. The Quran recounts the battle as a moment where God sent angels to assist the Muslims, providing them with the courage and strength they needed to defeat the Quraysh forces. The victory at Badr strengthened the resolve of the Muslim community, reinforcing their belief in divine support and the righteousness of their cause. The Battle of Badr also carried profound moral lessons. It highlighted the importance of unity, faith, and the willingness to sacrifice for a greater cause. The Muslims, led by Muhammad, fought not just for survival, but for the establishment of a just society rooted in the principles of monotheism, justice, and mercy. Their victory was a testament to the power of faith in the face of overwhelming odds. It also demonstrated the value of strategic thinking and discipline, as Muhammad had carefully planned the battle and ensured that his forces remained focused on their objective, even as they faced a much larger enemy. The consequences of the Battle of Badr were far-reaching. For the Muslims, it was a moment of validation and empowerment. The victory solidified their position in Medina and boosted their morale, providing them with the confidence to continue their mission. However, for the Quraysh, the defeat at Badr was a humiliating blow. The loss not only weakened their control over the region, but also threatened their economic interests, as the battle had disrupted their trade routes. The Quraysh could not allow this defeat to stand, and it fueled their determination to retaliate against the Muslims. The animosity between the two sides would only intensify in the years to come, leading to further military confrontations and a growing sense of tension. The Quraysh, humiliated by their defeat, vowed revenge and began to rally their forces for the next encounter. The aftermath of Badr would see the Quraysh strengthening their alliances with other tribes as they sought to avenge their loss and reassert their dominance over the Muslims. For Muhammad and his followers, the battle was not the end, but the beginning of a new phase in their struggle for survival and the spread of their message. After the victory at Badr, the Muslims in Medina felt emboldened, but the defeat of the Quraysh at Badr had not gone unnoticed. The Quraysh were determined to avenge their loss, and it didn't take long for them to organize a large military campaign aimed at defeating the Muslims. The stage was set for the Battle of Uhud, which would not only test the resolve of the Muslim community, but also shape the course of their struggle for survival and the establishment of Islam. The battle took place in 625 CE, just 1 year after Badr. The Quraysh, having regrouped and strengthened their forces, marched out with a much larger army, reportedly numbering around 3,000 men. The Muslims, on the other hand, were about 700 strong. Despite being outnumbered, the Muslims, led by Prophet Muhammad, prepared for the battle with great resolve. The Muslims understood that their victory in the previous year had been a result of divine support, but this time they knew they would have to rely on their own unity, discipline, and strategic planning to succeed. Muhammad, aware of the strategic importance of the terrain, positioned his forces near Mount Uhud, which provided a strong defensive position. He instructed a group of archers to position themselves on a hill, known as the Archers' Hill, which overlooked the battlefield. The archers were tasked with guarding the rear and ensuring that the Muslims would not be attacked from behind. Muhammad's plan was clear. The front lines of the army would engage the Quraysh, while the archers would protect the flanks and prevent any surprise attacks. The battle began, with fierce fighting, but initially the Muslims seemed to be gaining the upper hand. The Quraysh forces were pushed back, and the Muslims were on the verge of a decisive victory. However, the turning point came when some of the Muslim archers, feeling the battle was won, disobeyed Muhammad's direct orders and left their post to pursue the spoils of war. This left the rear exposed, and the Quraysh, led by Khalid ibn al-Walid, saw an opportunity to strike. With their rear flank open, the Quraysh cavalry launched a devastating attack on the Muslims from behind, turning the tide of the battle in their favour. The sudden attack threw the Muslim army into disarray. The Quraysh forces pressed their advantage, causing confusion and panic among the Muslims. Many of the Muslim fighters were either wounded or killed, and the Muslims retreated towards the mountain. Among the casualties was Hamza, the beloved uncle of Prophet Muhammad, who was martyred in the battle. His death was a personal loss for Muhammad and a blow to the Muslim community, as Hamza had been one of the strongest supporters of the Prophet. Despite the setback, the Muslims did not collapse. Muhammad, though wounded in the battle, remained steadfast. The Prophet's leadership and unwavering commitment to the cause provided the Muslims with a sense of hope and unity in the midst of the chaos. The retreat to the mountain was not a defeat, but a strategic regrouping. Muhammad continued to call his followers to stand firm, reminding them that victory and defeat were in the hands of God. The battle ended with the Quraysh failing to deliver a decisive blow, and they ultimately withdrew from the battlefield, unable to fully capitalize on their advantage. The defeat at Uhud was a painful setback for the Muslims, but it provided valuable lessons that would shape the future of the Muslim community. First and foremost, the battle underscored the importance of loyalty and discipline. The disobedience of the archers, who left their posts to pursue the spoils of war, had been a crucial factor in the Muslims' defeat. The lesson was clear. Loyalty to the mission and following the Prophet's instructions was paramount in achieving success. This event would serve as a constant reminder to the Muslims that their unity and commitment to God's will were their greatest strengths. Another key lesson from the Battle of Uhud was the importance of perseverance and resilience in the face of adversity. The Muslims, despite suffering heavy casualties and facing a setback, did not lose hope. Their faith in God's plan remained unshaken, and they continued to carry the message of Islam with determination. Muhammad's leadership throughout the battle, despite the physical and emotional toll it took on him, inspired the Muslims to stay true to their cause. The battle reinforced the idea that challenges and setbacks were inevitable, but what mattered most was how the community responded to them. The battle also taught the Muslims about the nature of struggle and sacrifice. The death of Hamza and others served as a powerful reminder of the sacrifices required in the path of faith. The losses at Uhud were heartbreaking, but they did not define the future of Islam. Instead, they galvanized the Muslim community to strive even harder in their mission, understanding that their work was greater than any individual sacrifice. Despite the difficulties, the battle had a silver lining. The Quraysh may have won the battle, but they did not achieve their ultimate goal of extinguishing the Muslim movement. The Muslims, though wounded and disheartened, retained their sense of purpose. They were reminded that Islam was not about worldly victories, but about submitting to God's will, no matter the circumstances. Muhammad's words, "This is the first test, but the victory will come with patience," resonated deeply within the hearts of his followers. The aftermath of Uhud left the Muslims wounded but resolute. The battle exposed the vulnerabilities of the Muslim community, but it also led to greater cohesion and commitment. The lessons learned in the heat of the battle would be instrumental in the future success of the Muslim community. The experience at Uhud strengthened their resolve and deepened their sense of unity. After the setbacks of the Battle of Uhud and the subsequent challenges faced by the Muslim community, a significant turning point came in 628 CE, when Prophet Muhammad and his followers embarked on what seemed like an unlikely journey, one that would lead to a peaceful resolution between the Muslims and the Quraysh. This journey, which would come to be known as the Umrah al-Qada, was intended to allow the Muslims to perform the pilgrimage to Mecca. However, what began as a religious expedition would ultimately result in the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, an agreement that would have profound political and spiritual implications for the nascent Muslim community. The Muslims, having been restricted from performing the pilgrimage in previous years, sought permission from the Quraysh to enter Mecca for a peaceful pilgrimage. Muhammad, accompanied by a large group of his followers, set out from Medina with the intention of performing the lesser pilgrimage, Umrah, despite the continued tension between the two sides. The Quraysh, wary of the growing Muslim influence, saw this as a potential threat and mobilized their forces to prevent the Muslims from entering Mecca. They did not, however, wish to provoke another confrontation. Instead, they aimed to prevent the Muslims from completing the pilgrimage, which they considered an affront to their control over Mecca. When the Muslims reached Hudaybiyah, a location just outside Mecca, the Quraysh intercepted them. What could have easily turned into another battle was instead transformed into a diplomatic negotiation. Both sides agreed to send envoys to discuss the possibility of peace, and after tense discussions, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was drawn up. The treaty was, on the surface, a temporary agreement that allowed the Muslims to return to Medina without having completed their pilgrimage that year, but it had lasting significance beyond the terms laid out in the document. The terms of the treaty were remarkable in their balance. The key provisions included a 10-year truce between the Muslims and the Quraysh, with both sides agreeing not to engage in hostilities against one another. The treaty allowed the Muslims to return to Medina and perform the pilgrimage the following year. Additionally, it was agreed that any tribe or individual could join either side, either by aligning with the Quraysh or the Muslims, and that those who chose to join the Muslims would be protected, while those who joined the Quraysh would also be under their protection. One of the most controversial aspects of the treaty, from the perspective of the Muslims, was a clause that allowed any Meccan who wished to join the Muslims in Medina to do so freely. However, if any Muslim chose to defect to the Quraysh in Mecca, they would be returned to the Quraysh without resistance. This clause was a bitter pill for the Muslims to swallow, especially considering that many of the early followers of Islam had faced severe persecution in Mecca. Nevertheless, Muhammad accepted this provision, believing it was part of a larger strategic plan. At first glance, many of Muhammad's companions were dissatisfied with the treaty, particularly the clause that seemed to favor the Quraysh. Some felt that the Muslims had been made to compromise too much, and there was frustration over the fact that they had come all the way to Mecca only to be forced to return without completing their pilgrimage. However, Muhammad, in his wisdom, recognized the deeper strategic benefits of the treaty. He explained to his followers that this peace agreement would lay the groundwork for future successes, and that the long-term benefits would far outweigh any immediate frustrations. The treaty, despite its apparent concessions, was a diplomatic victory for Muhammad. The 10-year truce provided the Muslim community with a period of stability, allowing them to focus on internal growth spread their message, and gain allies. Without the constant threat of attack, the Muslims were able to strengthen their position both spiritually and politically. The agreement also allowed for the consolidation of the Muslim community, as it provided a secure environment in which the Muslim population could grow in Medina and other surrounding regions. Additionally, the treaty gave the Muslims the opportunity to spread their message to new tribes and regions without the constant fear of aggression from the Quraysh. This peace allowed the Muslims to establish more formal relationships with other Arab tribes, some of which had been hesitant to support Islam due to the ongoing conflict between the Muslims and the Quraysh. As a result, many tribes saw the truce as a sign of the strength and stability of the Muslim community and began to consider the benefits of aligning with Muhammad's growing movement. The treaty also had significant theological implications. It was seen by the Muslims as a sign of God's approval. The Quran, in Surah Al-Fath, revealed verses that praised the treaty, calling it a clear victory. The revelation emphasized that the treaty was a manifestation of God's will and would lead to greater victories in the future. This divine approval strengthened the faith of the Muslim community and affirmed their belief that they were on the right path. The Treaty of Hudaybiyah, though initially perceived as a setback, turned out to be a masterstroke of diplomacy by Muhammad. It secured peace between the Muslims and the Quraysh, allowing Islam to spread further and more freely. By securing the truce, Muhammad demonstrated not only his strategic acumen but also his commitment to peace and his ability to navigate complex political situations. The treaty proved that Islam was not just a religious movement, but a growing political and social force, capable of negotiating and establishing lasting agreements with even the most powerful tribes of Arabia. The peaceful conquest of Mecca in 630 CE stands as one of the most significant moments in Islamic history, marking the culmination of years of struggle, perseverance, and strategic diplomacy. After more than 2 decades of conflict, persecution, and exile, Muhammad and his followers finally entered the city of Mecca, but unlike previous confrontations, this time the entry was devoid of bloodshed. Instead of war, the conquest of Mecca became a powerful testament to the principles of mercy, magnanimity, and the transformative power of faith. The events leading up to the conquest of Mecca can be traced back to the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, signed in 628 CE. While initially seen as a compromise, the treaty had allowed the Muslims to establish a period of peace with the Quraysh, their former adversaries. Over the next 2 years, the Muslims used this time to strengthen their position, expanding their influence and attracting new followers from various tribes across the Arabian Peninsula. Meanwhile, the Quraysh, despite the treaty, continued to violate its terms. They had allied with the tribe of Banu Bakr and attacked a tribe allied with the Muslims, which was a direct breach of the agreement. Muhammad, upon learning of the Quraysh's violation, called upon his followers to prepare for action. Recognizing that the Quraysh had broken their promise, Muhammad saw an opportunity to reclaim Mecca and bring it under the banner of Islam. This time, however, there would be no battle, no siege, and no bloodshed, just a strategic march that would lead to the peaceful takeover of the city. The Muslim army, which had grown significantly in numbers over the years, was prepared for a decisive move. Muhammad gathered an army of 10,000 men and Malpanda. In January of 630 CE, they began their march toward Mecca. As they approached the city, the Quraysh were taken by surprise. They had underestimated the strength and unity of the Muslim forces, and upon hearing the news of the approaching army, the leaders of Mecca scrambled to prepare for an impending confrontation. However, Muhammad's goal was not war, but reconciliation, and he made it clear that his army would enter the city peacefully, as long as the Quraysh did not resist. In the face of overwhelming odds, the Quraysh, realizing they had little choice, chose not to engage in battle. Instead, they sent representatives to negotiate terms with Muhammad. These representatives included some of the most prominent members of the Quraysh, such as Abu Sufyan, the leader of the Quraysh at the time. Muhammad, ever magnanimous, offered amnesty to those who chose to submit to the new order. His words were not of revenge, but of reconciliation. "Go, for you are free," he told the Quraysh. This act of clemency was a demonstration of Muhammad's strength and character. He was not interested in retaliation, but in uniting the people of Mecca under the banner of Islam. As Muhammad and his army entered Mecca, they did so with humility and respect. The city that had once rejected him, persecuted his followers, and forced him into exile, now saw him return not as a conqueror but as a leader who sought peace and unity. Muhammad ordered the idols within the Kaaba, the holiest site of Mecca, to be destroyed. This symbolic act of removing the idols marked the end of idol worship in the city, and the Kaaba was dedicated solely to the worship of the one true God, Allah. One of the most significant aspects of the conquest was Muhammad's magnanimity towards the Quraysh. Despite the years of persecution, Muhammad forgave those who had wronged him and his followers. His decision to pardon his former enemies demonstrated the power of his leadership and the spirit of Islam, which emphasized forgiveness, mercy, and the importance of overcoming hatred. The Quraysh, who had once been the bitterest opponents of Islam, now found themselves within a society shaped by Islamic principles. Many of the leaders of the Quraysh, including Abu Sufyan, accepted Islam, recognizing its power to bring peace and unity to the region. The conquest of Mecca was not just a military victory, it was a victory of faith, compassion, and the triumph of a moral vision. Muhammad's entry into Mecca without bloodshed, his clemency towards his enemies, and his dedication to establishing justice for all were key elements that set Islam apart from many of the conquest-driven movements of the time. The peaceful nature of the conquest showed the world that Islam was not just a religion of war, but one of peace, mercy, and on social justice. The consequences of the conquest were immediate and profound. With Mecca now under Muslim control, the spiritual and political center of Arabia shifted. The Kaaba, now purified of idols, became the central focal point of worship for Muslims. The city itself, which had long been a stronghold of resistance, now became the heart of the Muslim world. Muhammad's leadership was no longer just religious, but also political, and the Quraysh's influence waned dramatically. In the year 632 CE, a few months before his passing, Prophet Muhammad undertook his final pilgrimage to Mecca, an event that would become one of the most significant moments in Islamic history. This pilgrimage, known as the Hajj, was marked not only by the rituals of the pilgrimage, but also by Muhammad's final address to the Muslim community, his farewell sermon. Delivered at the plain of Arafat, one of the most sacred sites in Islam, this sermon encapsulated the core teachings of Islam and provided a clear blueprint for the future of the Muslim community. It was a profound and powerful reminder of the values of equality, justice, and unity that Muhammad had preached throughout his life. Muhammad's farewell sermon came at a time when Islam had spread widely across the Arabian Peninsula, and the Muslim community had achieved a significant degree of unity. It was a moment of reflection and final guidance, where the Prophet, with the wisdom of years and the experience of leading a community through trials and triumphs, imparted the fundamental principles that should guide the actions of his followers for generations to come. The central themes of the sermon were equality and justice, which were groundbreaking in a world steeped in social and economic divisions. Muhammad began by emphasizing the sanctity of human life, declaring that all people, regardless of their status or background, were equal in the eyes of God. He famously proclaimed, "All mankind is from Adam and Eve. An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor does a non-Arab have any superiority over an Arab. A white has no superiority over a black, nor does a black have any superiority over a white. None have superiority over another except by piety and good action." This declaration was revolutionary at the time, as it challenged the entrenched social hierarchies and prejudices of pre-Islamic Arabia. By proclaiming the fundamental equality of all human beings, Muhammad laid the foundation for an inclusive and just society where the dignity of every individual was respected. Muhammad also stressed the importance of justice in his sermon. He reminded the Muslim community that justice should be at the heart of their dealings with one another, regardless of their social or economic status. He emphasized that rights must be upheld, and that no one should be wronged or oppressed, whether in personal matters or in the broader societal context. His words reinforced the Islamic commitment to social justice. "Fear God and be just to your women. You have taken them on the trust of God, and have made their bodies lawful unto you by the words of God. So treat them well and kindly." This statement underscored Muhammad's advocacy for the fair and respectful treatment of women, calling for an end to the exploitation and mistreatment that had been common in pre-Islamic society. The sermon also addressed the essential bonds of the Muslim community, emphasizing unity and mutual respect. Muhammad called on his followers to uphold the ties of brotherhood and solidarity, saying, "All of you are equal, as brothers and sisters in faith, and none shall take precedence over another except through God's command." His call for unity was not just a plea for harmony within the Muslim community, but a reminder of the responsibility each believer had toward the well-being of others. The concept of ummah, the global Muslim community, was reinforced in the sermon, stressing the importance of standing together in both good times and times of hardship. Another key message in the farewell sermon was the finality and completeness of the message of Islam. Muhammad declared that the religion had been perfected, saying, "This day I have perfected for you your religion, and completed my favor upon you, and have approved for you Islam as your religion." With these words, Muhammad signified that the revelations he had received over the past 23 years had laid the foundation for a complete and final system of guidance for humanity. The Prophet made it clear that no further revelations or prophecies would follow, and that the teachings of Islam, as revealed to him, were to guide humanity for all time. The sermon thus marked the completion of Muhammad's prophetic mission, with Islam as the final universal message from God. In his sermon, Muhammad also reminded his followers of their duties to uphold the teachings of Islam and to practice them faithfully. He urged them to honor the Quran and his teachings, and to carry the message of Islam to future generations. He said, "O people, I am leaving among you two precious things. If you adhere to both of them, you will never go astray. They are the Book of God, and my example, that is, my sunnah." The Quran and the Prophet's sunnah, his way of life, were to serve as the eternal guides for the Muslim community, ensuring that the core principles of Islam would continue to guide them long after his death. As the sermon came to a close, Muhammad turned to his followers with a final reminder of the importance of accountability before God. "Have I conveyed the message to you?" the Prophet asked. The crowd responded in unison, "Yes." Muhammad then said, "O Allah, bear witness." This moment, in which the Prophet sought the testimony of God and the acknowledgement of his followers, symbolized the completion of his mission and the full transmission of the divine message. The farewell sermon was not just a reflection on the past, but a forward-looking statement that would guide the future of the Muslim community. Its messages of equality, justice, unity, and piety were timeless principles that would continue to shape the Muslim world long after the Prophet's passing. His call for adherence to the Quran and Sunnah and his reminder of the finality of his mission were essential elements in preserving the integrity and direction of the Islamic faith. At the heart of Prophet Muhammad's teachings lies a profound commitment to justice and equality. These principles, woven into the fabric of Islam, reflect the fundamental values that Muhammad emphasized throughout his life. From his early years in Mecca to his final sermons in Medina, justice and equality were not just abstract ideals, but actionable, guiding principles that shaped the lives of his followers. Through his words and actions, Muhammad established a vision of society where all people, regardless of their social status, ethnicity, or gender, were entitled to dignity, respect, and fair treatment. The concept of justice in Islam is rooted in the belief that all people are equal before God, and that every individual has inherent worth. This is made clear in the Quran, where God commands the establishment of justice as one of the fundamental duties of every believer. Muhammad, as the final messenger of God, not only conveyed this message but exemplified it in his leadership, in his dealings with others, and in his efforts to reform the societal norms of pre-Islamic Arabia, which were often marked by tribalism, injustice, and inequality. One of the most important aspects of justice in Islam is its emphasis on fairness in all aspects of life. Muhammad consistently advocated for equal treatment for all individuals, regardless of their background. In a society where tribal affiliation often determined one's social standing, Muhammad's message broke down these barriers. He taught that no one person was superior to another based on race, ethnicity, or social status. As he said in his farewell sermon, "An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor does a non-Arab have any superiority over an Arab. A white has no superiority over a black, nor does a black have any superiority over a white. None have superiority over another except by piety and good action. This radical declaration not only abolished the existing social hierarchies, but also laid the foundation for a truly egalitarian society. Justice for Muhammad also meant upholding the rights of the vulnerable, including women, the poor, orphans, and slaves. In pre-Islamic Arabia, women were often seen as property, and their rights were severely restricted. Muhammad, however, called for the protection and elevation of women's status, ensuring that they had the right to inheritance, to choose their spouses, and to engage in economic activities. He is quoted as saying, "The best of you are those who are the best to their women." This is a clear example of his commitment to justice, as he sought to ensure that women were treated with dignity and respect, a revolutionary stance in the context of his time. In addition to his advocacy for women, Muhammad's message of justice extended to the poor and marginalized. One of the key principles of Islam is the obligation to support the less fortunate, and Muhammad's actions demonstrated this commitment. He often spoke of the importance of charity and ensuring that wealth was distributed fairly among the members of society. The Quran commands that a portion of one's wealth be given to charity, and Muhammad put this into practice by helping the poor, the needy, and those who were suffering from social inequality. His dedication to the welfare of the poor was not just a theoretical stance, but a fundamental part of his leadership. As the Prophet once said, "He who eats and drinks while his brother goes hungry is not one of us." In his efforts to implement justice, Muhammad also introduced revolutionary legal reforms. For example, in matters of inheritance, the Quran introduced clear guidelines to ensure that wealth was distributed fairly among family members, with particular attention to the rights of women and children. Prior to this, inheritance laws were arbitrary, and women often had no claim to their family's wealth. Muhammad's reforms addressed this inequality, providing women with a clear share of the inheritance, ensuring their economic rights. The Prophet Muhammad also worked to protect the rights of those who were often excluded from society, including slaves. Slavery was widespread in pre-Islamic Arabia, but Muhammad's teachings progressively set out to improve the treatment of slaves and encourage their liberation. The Prophet advocated for kindness to slaves, advising that they be treated with respect and fairness. He said, "Feed them from what you eat and clothe them from what you wear." His actions reinforced these words. He freed many slaves during his lifetime, including Bilal, one of his earliest and most beloved companions, who had been enslaved due to his faith. Muhammad's emphasis on justice extended to the realm of social welfare and legal rights for every individual, regardless of their social standing. One of the most striking aspects of Muhammad's teachings on justice is how they were implemented in practice. He did not merely talk about justice, he acted on it in tangible ways. As a leader, he was often called upon to arbitrate disputes and ensure fairness in the community. In one well-known instance, he intervened to stop the harsh treatment of a woman named Fatima, who had been accused of stealing. Instead of allowing her to be punished based on her social status, he insisted on applying the law equally, regardless of her rank. He famously said, "If my own daughter had committed this crime, I would have done the same to her." This act of justice showed that, in Islam, even the powerful and privileged were not above the law. Justice, as taught by Muhammad, also meant being fair in matters of war and peace. Even in times of conflict, Muhammad had instructed his followers to uphold ethical conduct, including the protection of civilians and the prohibition of unnecessary destruction. He taught that peace was preferable to war, and he only resorted to conflict when absolutely necessary in defense of the community or the faith. One of the most transformative aspects of Muhammad's teachings was his emphasis on the rights and dignities of women. In a society that often viewed women as property, Muhammad's revelations and actions elevated the status of women, ensuring they were treated with respect, equality, and fairness. His teachings provided a revolutionary framework for the rights of women in marriage, inheritance, education, and social life. In doing so, he not only empowered women, but also laid the foundation for a more just and equitable society, where gender was no longer a determinant of one's worth or rights. In pre-Islamic Arabia, women had very limited rights. They were often denied the right to own property, inherit wealth, or make decisions about their lives. Marriage was often a transaction in which women had little agency, and divorce could be initiated by men at will, leaving women vulnerable. However, Muhammad's teachings brought a radical shift to this dynamic, placing the rights and well-being of women at the forefront of his social reforms. One of the most significant aspects of Muhammad's teachings regarding women was his advocacy for women's rights in marriage. Islam introduced the concept of mutual consent in marriage, requiring that both parties agree to the union. Unlike the pre-Islamic customs where marriages were often arranged without the woman's consent, Islam gave women the right to choose their spouses and to enter into marriage freely. The Quran states, "Do not inherit women against their will." Quran 4:19, making it clear that women had the right to choose their marriage partners and were not to be treated as property. Muhammad also introduced the concept of mahr, a mandatory marriage gift that a husband must give to his wife, which could be money or property. The mahr was a means of securing financial independence for women within the marriage. It ensured that a woman had a personal financial asset that she could use as she wished, whether for her personal needs or to safeguard her security in case of divorce or widowhood. The institution of mahr, along with the right to seek a divorce under specific circumstances, was a significant improvement over the social norms of the time, where women had little control over their financial or marital affairs. Another critical area of reform was inheritance. In pre-Islamic Arabia, women were often excluded from inheritance or given a token share, while male relatives inherited the majority of family wealth. Muhammad's teachings brought about a groundbreaking change in this regard. The Quran explicitly states that women have the right to inherit from both their fathers and husbands, ensuring them a portion of the family's wealth. The Quran says, "For men is a share of what the parents and relatives leave, and for women is a share of what the parents and relatives leave, be it little or much, an obligatory share." Quran 4:7. This reform granted women legal and financial independence, giving them the right to own property and manage their wealth without the need for male guardianship. Muhammad's reforms also extended to the educational rights of women. In a society where education was reserved primarily for men, Muhammad emphasized the importance of knowledge for all Muslims, regardless of gender. He stated, "Seeking knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim." This directive applied to both men and women, as it was understood that both were equally responsible for acquiring knowledge to fulfill their religious duties. Women were encouraged to seek education, and many of the Prophet's companions were women who became scholars, teachers, and active participants in the religious and intellectual life of the community. For instance, Aisha, the Prophet's wife, became one of the most prominent scholars in early Islam, and her contributions to hadith and Islamic jurisprudence are invaluable to this day. Moreover, Muhammad's teachings also stressed the importance of kindness, respect, and equality in relationships between men and women. He consistently reminded men to treat their wives with love and compassion, stating, "The best of you are those who are the best to their women." This principle of treating women with respect and kindness was not limited to marriage, but extended to all interactions with women in the community. His advocacy for the protection and fair treatment of women was revolutionary, particularly when compared to the prevalent attitudes of the time, which often objectified or ignored the needs of women. Despite these progressive reforms, women's rights were not fully realized overnight. The implementation of these principles required ongoing effort from both men and women to overcome societal norms that had been entrenched for centuries. However, Muhammad's example and his teachings provided the foundation for a society that recognized the inherent dignity and worth of every individual, regardless of gender. His actions set a precedent for women's rights that would echo through the centuries, shaping the development of Islamic societies and their treatment of women. In the lives of his followers, these principles were put into practice in ways that transformed the role of women in the early Muslim community. Women in Medina played crucial roles in the development of the nascent Islamic State. They participated in battles, acted as supporters of Muhammad's mission, and took on leadership roles within their families and communities. They were not just passive recipients of Muhammad's message, but active agents in shaping the future of Islam. In addition to being the final messenger of God, a statesman, and a military leader, Prophet Muhammad was also a devoted husband and father. His role within his family provides valuable insights into his character and the principles that he embodied throughout his life. His relationships with his wives and children reflect the deep love, respect, and fairness that he practiced in his personal life, values that he also imparted to his followers. By examining Muhammad's role as a family man, we gain a deeper understanding of how he balanced his spiritual, social, and familial responsibilities, and how his example shaped the Islamic view of family and relationships. Muhammad's first and most prominent wife was Khadija bint Khuwaylid, a successful and respected businesswoman in Mecca. Their marriage was based on mutual love, respect, and companionship. Muhammad was 25 years old when he married Khadija, who was 15 years older than him. Despite their age difference, their relationship was one of profound harmony, and Khadija's support was instrumental in the early days of Muhammad's prophetic mission. She was the first to believe in his message, offering both emotional and financial support. Muhammad often spoke fondly of Khadija, remembering her with great affection long after her passing. He never remarried while she was alive, and his loyalty to her was well known. This devotion exemplified his deep respect for his wife, setting a model for mutual respect and loyalty in marriage. Their marriage, which lasted for 25 years, was characterized by emotional intimacy, shared responsibilities, and mutual care. Khadija bore the brunt of the initial trials the Prophet faced, especially in the early years when the Quraysh persecuted him and his followers. Throughout this period, Khadija's unwavering support strengthened Muhammad's resolve. After her death, Muhammad would often reminisce about her qualities, and he continued to speak of her with great reverence. The love between Muhammad and Khadija was a source of inspiration for the Muslim community, illustrating the importance of compassion, respect, and understanding in a marital relationship. Following Khadija's death, Muhammad married several women, each for reasons that contributed to the broader social and political needs of the early Muslim community. His marriages were never based on personal desire alone. They were often undertaken to strengthen alliances, protect widows, or provide support to women in difficult situations. One of the most well-known of his marriages was to Aisha bint Abi Bakr, the daughter of his close companion Abu Bakr. Aisha was young when they married, and their relationship was characterized by intellectual companionship. Aisha became one of the most influential figures in early Islam, contributing significantly to the preservation of hadith, the sayings and actions of Muhammad, and Islamic jurisprudence. Her sharp intellect and deep knowledge of Islamic teachings made her one of the foremost scholars of her time, and her relationship with Muhammad demonstrated how mutual respect and learning can flourish in a marriage. In addition to Aisha, Muhammad married women such as Hafsa, the daughter of Umar ibn al-Khattab, and Zainab bint Jahsh, among others. Each marriage had its unique context and purpose. For instance, his marriage to Zainab, initially controversial due to the social customs surrounding marriage and adoption, was a powerful statement about the abolition of pre-Islamic norms. Zainab was previously married to Muhammad's adopted son, Zayd. After their divorce, Muhammad married Zainab, defying traditional norms surrounding adoption and marriage. This marriage was a clear demonstration of Muhammad's commitment to establishing equality and justice within society, even when it went against established conventions. Despite the political and social motives behind many of his marriages, Muhammad's treatment of his wives was marked by respect, kindness, and fairness. He shared his time equally among them, ensuring that none of his wives felt neglected or unfairly treated. Muhammad's household was one where love and affection prevailed, and his behavior towards his wives set a high standard for their treatment in Islam. He is reported to have said, "The best of you are those who are the best to their wives," emphasizing the importance of kindness and fairness in marriage. As a father, Muhammad was equally compassionate and involved in the lives of his children. He had 4 daughters, Zainab, Fatima, Ruqayya, and Kulthum, and 2 sons, Qasim and Abdullah, both of whom died in infancy. The Prophet's love for his children was evident, and his grief at the loss of his sons, particularly Qasim, was deeply felt. Despite the early deaths of his sons, his daughters remained central to his life. His most beloved daughter, Fatima, was his closest companion. He shared a strong bond with her, and their relationship reflected mutual respect and love. Muhammad often spoke highly of Fatima, describing her as the leader of the women of paradise. His deep love for her and the affection they shared symbolized the importance of family in Islam, particularly the relationship between parents and children. Muhammad's relationship with his children and wives demonstrated a profound respect for family bonds and personal relationships. He balanced his family life with his duties as a leader, and his example set a standard for how Muslims should approach their own families. The emphasis on compassion, loyalty, and respect within the household not only shaped his own personal relationships, but also laid the foundation for how family dynamics would evolve within the Muslim community. In the context of his leadership, Muhammad never allowed his familial obligations to interfere with his responsibilities as a spiritual and political leader. He managed his time effectively, ensuring that his role as a father and husband did not diminish his commitment to the wider Muslim community. His ability to balance these roles reflects the importance of family in Islamic teachings and serves as a model for believers on how to prioritize both personal and communal responsibilities. Prophet Muhammad's relationship with his companions, known as the Sahaba, is one of the most profound aspects of his life. These men and women were the closest followers of the Prophet, those who believed in him and supported his mission during the most difficult times. The respect, kindness, and humility Muhammad exhibited toward his companions were not just a reflection of his character, but also a key factor in the unity and strength of the early Muslim community. Through his interactions with them, Muhammad demonstrated the values of empathy, trust, and leadership that would shape the course of Islamic history. From the very beginning of his prophethood, Muhammad treated his companions with deep respect, valuing their loyalty and support. He understood that the strength of the Muslim community was not only in the teachings of Islam, but also in the unity and cohesion among its members. His companions were not just followers, but partners in the mission of Islam, and he often sought their counsel and input. Muhammad's inclusive leadership style set a precedent for the way a leader should treat his followers, not as subordinates, but as equals in the pursuit of a common goal. One of the most striking features of Muhammad's relationship with his companions was his humility. Despite his status as the final prophet and a political leader, he never allowed his position to overshadow his personal interactions. He was known to walk among his companions, share meals with them, and engage in their daily activities, treating them as equals. Muhammad's humility was reflected in his words. None of you truly believes until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. This profound statement encapsulated the essence of his leadership: love, respect, and mutual care. He also demonstrated humility in his willingness to learn from his companions. While he was the ultimate guide for the Muslim community, he did not shy away from consulting his companions on various matters. His close relationship with figures like Abu Bakr, Umar ibn al-Khattab, Uthman ibn Affan, and Ali ibn Abi Talib, among others, was not merely one of leadership and follower, but of mutual respect. These companions, who would later become key leaders in the Muslim community, had a profound influence on the shaping of Islamic law, military strategy, and governance. Muhammad's openness to their counsel and advice showed that leadership in Islam was based on collaboration, not authoritarianism. One of the most significant aspects of Muhammad's relationship with his companions was his treatment of them during times of hardship. From the early years of persecution in Mecca to the battles of Badr and Uhud, the Prophet's companions endured immense trials. Yet Muhammad always led by example, maintaining a sense of hope and commitment to the mission. His ability to endure personal losses, such as the death of his beloved companions and family members, while continuing to lead with compassion and conviction, inspired his followers to persevere in the face of adversity. His relationship with his companions during these challenging times was one of mutual support and dedication to a higher cause. The Prophet also demonstrated great kindness and concern for the well-being of his companions, often giving them his full attention and affection. He was known for his gentle demeanor, never harsh or severe. His kindness was evident in his interactions with those who had just accepted Islam, even if they had previously opposed him. He was quick to forgive and always encouraged others to do the same. When a companion made a mistake or fell short of the mark, Muhammad offered guidance with compassion and understanding, always seeking to uplift and encourage rather than criticize or condemn. This ability to see the good in others, even when they faltered, was one of the hallmarks of his leadership. Another important aspect of Muhammad's relationship with his companions was his emphasis on the importance of brotherhood within the Muslim community. He often emphasized that Muslims were not just a group of individuals, but a collective body with a shared purpose. The concept of ummah, the global Muslim community, was central to his teachings. Muhammad sought to foster a sense of kinship among his companions, urging them to treat each other with the same care and respect they would treat their own family. The bond of ummah was not based on ethnicity, wealth, or social status, but on shared faith and a commitment to justice. This sense of solidarity, built on the relationships between Muhammad and his companions, formed the backbone of the early Muslim community. One of the most remarkable aspects of Muhammad's relationship with his companions was his recognition of their individual strengths and talents. He understood that each companion had unique qualities that contributed to the success of the Muslim community. Muhammad appointed different companions to various roles, from military leadership to the administration of Medina, based on their abilities and expertise. For example, Abu Bakr, who was known for his piety and leadership qualities, was appointed as the first caliph after Muhammad's death, while Umar was known for his strong leadership and legal acumen, becoming the second caliph. Muhammad's ability to recognize the talents and strengths of his companions ensured the long-term stability and success of the Islamic State. Muhammad's personal relationships with his companions were foundational in shaping the early Islamic community. His treatment of them as equals, his humility, and his commitment to justice and fairness has created an environment of mutual respect and cooperation. The companions, in turn, became steadfast in their devotion to him and to the message of Islam, supporting him through the most difficult trials and spreading the faith after his death. Their loyalty, love, and dedication to Muhammad were central to the preservation and growth of Islam. Following the death of Prophet Muhammad in 632 CE, Islam entered a new phase of expansion that would see the faith spread rapidly across the Arabian Peninsula and beyond. What began as a small persecuted community in Mecca had now transformed into a powerful force that would shape the political, social, and religious landscape of the region for centuries to come. The rapid spread of Islam was not just a result of military conquest, but of deeply rooted principles of faith, unity, and justice that resonated with diverse peoples in the regions it touched. The immediate aftermath of Muhammad's death posed a significant challenge for the Muslim community. The Prophet's passing left a leadership vacuum, which was swiftly filled by his close companion Abu Bakr, who became the first caliph. The early caliphates, starting with Abu Bakr and later Umar ibn al-Khattab, would play crucial roles in the consolidation of the Muslim state and its expansion. They not only preserved the unity of the community, but also guided it through moments of political instability and external threats. The first caliph, Abu Bakr, was faced with the task of keeping the unity of the Ummah, the Muslim community, intact. The death of Muhammad had led to what became known as the Ridda Wars, a series of rebellions by Arab tribes that sought to break away from the nascent Muslim state. Abu Bakr, with the support of the companions, successfully defeated these rebellions, reasserting the unity of the Muslim community. This set the stage for the more aggressive expansion of Islam beyond the Arabian Peninsula, as the unity of the Muslims allowed them to direct their energies outward. Under the leadership of Abu Bakr's successor, Umar ibn al-Khattab, the Muslim Empire expanded rapidly, first into the neighboring territories of the Byzantine and Sasanian empires. The Muslims achieved a string of military victories, beginning with the Battle of Yarmouk in 636 CE, which resulted in the decisive defeat of the Byzantine forces in Syria. This victory was followed by the conquest of Jerusalem in 637 CE, which was later followed by the spread of Islam into Egypt, Persia, and North Africa. Umar's leadership was characterized by his strategic military insight and his commitment to the Islamic principles of justice, which he applied in the territories he conquered. One key factor in the rapid expansion of Islam was the strength and unity of the Muslim community. The early Muslims, united by their shared faith, had a sense of purpose that was deeply motivating. This unity allowed them to overcome significant challenges in battle and in the administration of the rapidly expanding empire. Unlike other empires of the time, which often relied on coercion and force to maintain control. The Islamic community attracted many converts due to its message of equality, social justice, and opportunity. Another factor that contributed to the spread of Islam was its policy of religious tolerance. Although the Muslim armies sought to expand the territory of the Islamic State, they generally did not force conversion on the populations they encountered. Instead, the Islamic rulers offered protection and religious freedom to the conquered peoples, including Jews and Christians, who were known as people of the book. These communities were allowed to practice their own religions, provided they paid a tax known as the jizya in exchange for protection and exemption from military service. This policy of tolerance and coexistence allowed Islam to spread in a way that was distinct from other imperial conquests of the time. Islam's appeal was not limited to military conquests, however. The principles of justice and equality inherent in Islam resonated deeply with many peoples in the conquered territories. In particular, the emphasis on social justice, the fair treatment of women, the protection of the poor, and the abolition of social hierarchies struck a chord with many who had been living under systems of oppression. The Quran's message of the oneness of God and the importance of piety and good deeds provided a compelling moral framework that transcended the tribal divisions and social inequalities of pre-Islamic societies. The spread of Islam was also facilitated by the establishment of a strong infrastructure for governance, which allowed the Muslim state to administer large territories efficiently. Under Umar's leadership, the Diwan, the state bureaucracy, was developed, which helped manage the resources and taxes of the expanding empire. The establishment of a unified legal system based on Islamic law, Sharia, ensured consistency in the administration of justice and governance. This allowed the Muslims to maintain order and stability in the vast areas they had conquered. Islam's expansion continued through the subsequent caliphates, with the Umayyad Caliphate 661 to 750 CE and the Abbasid Caliphate 750–1258 CE leading the way. The Umayyads expanded the Islamic Empire into Spain, Central Asia, and India, while the Abbasids further solidified Islamic rule across North Africa and the Middle East. The spread of Islam was not just political, it was also cultural and intellectual. Muslim scholars made significant contributions in fields such as mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy, many of which were influenced by the diverse cultures that the Muslims had encountered and integrated into their empire. By the time of the early Abbasid period, Islam had spread from the small community in Mecca to an empire that stretched from Spain to India, uniting a vast and diverse array of peoples. This rapid expansion of Islam was not solely a result of military might, but of the deep appeal of its message and the strong bonds within the Muslim community. The faith was able to transcend national, ethnic, and cultural boundaries, creating a shared identity among people from various walks of life. The legacy of Prophet Muhammad, spanning over 14 centuries, continues to resonate with billions of people across the globe. His teachings, which transformed the Arabian Peninsula and extended far beyond, remain a guiding light for Muslims, shaping not only their spiritual lives but also their social, cultural, and political landscapes. The Prophet's influence is seen in the structure of Islamic societies, the legal and ethical frameworks that govern them, and the moral principles that continue to guide the lives of millions. His legacy is not merely historical, but living, manifesting in the daily practices of his followers and the enduring relevance of his message of justice, mercy, and unity. One of the most enduring aspects of Muhammad's legacy is the spread of Islam itself. What began as a small, persecuted community in Mecca has, under the leadership of Muhammad and his successors, expanded into one of the largest religions in the world. Muhammad's teachings and the Quran, which he received and shared, form the bedrock of Islamic belief and practice. These teachings have provided a spiritual and moral framework for countless generations of Muslims, offering a vision of a just, compassionate, and God-conscious society. His message transcended the confines of his time, addressing the eternal human quest for meaning, purpose, and justice. Muhammad's emphasis on monotheism, the belief in one God, shaped the worldview of his followers and unified them under a shared purpose. This idea of the oneness of God, or tawheed, continues to be central to Islamic theology and practice. Muhammad's rejection of idolatry and his assertion of God's exclusive sovereignty led to the establishment of a society based on the principle of divine justice. The unity of God, as expressed in the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith, remains the core belief of every Muslim. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. This simple yet profound statement encapsulates the heart of Muhammad's teachings and his lifelong mission to bring people back to the worship of the one true God. In addition to his theological contributions, Muhammad's ethical teachings have had a profound impact on how Muslims approach social justice, personal conduct, and community life. His insistence on the importance of honesty, charity, humility, and respect for others laid the foundation for the moral and ethical behavior that is encouraged in the Quran and hadith. His life exemplified the values of kindness, integrity, and justice. Whether in his treatment of the poor, the oppressed, women, or the environment, Muhammad demonstrated a commitment to fairness and compassion that transcended social boundaries. His actions and sayings continue to guide Muslims on how to live justly and morally, ensuring that ethics are integrated into both individual and communal life. Muhammad's relationship with his companions, the Sahaba, was another key element of his legacy. He cultivated a sense of brotherhood and mutual support among them, and through their unwavering loyalty, his message spread far beyond the Arabian Peninsula. The companions, who were integral to the preservation and dissemination of his teachings, played a crucial role in the early expansion of Islam, and their actions laid the groundwork for the creation of a global Muslim community. The Ummah, the worldwide community of Muslims, remains a central aspect of the legacy Muhammad left behind, with his teachings on unity and cooperation continuing to shape the bonds between Muslims today. Beyond his immediate followers, Muhammad's impact extended to subsequent generations, especially through the spread of knowledge. His encouragement of learning, particularly in fields such as science, mathematics, medicine, and philosophy, inspired a golden age of Islamic civilization. Scholars during the Abbasid Caliphate and beyond took Muhammad's call for knowledge seriously, making vast contributions to human understanding that influenced both the Islamic world and the West. His teachings about the pursuit of knowledge, seeking knowledge is an obligation for every Muslim, encouraged a culture of intellectualism and scientific inquiry that flourished for centuries. Moreover, Muhammad's legacy lives on through the Quran, the holy book of Islam, which remains unchanged since its revelation. The Quran is regarded as the literal word of God, preserved in its original form and passed down through generations. It continues to be a source of guidance, inspiration, and comfort for Muslims worldwide. Recitation of the Quran is an act of devotion, and its verses are incorporated into daily prayers, rituals, and celebrations. The Quran's timeless message, along with the hadith, the sayings and actions of the Prophet, provides Muslims with a moral and spiritual guide to navigating every aspect of life. Islamic law, or Sharia, also stems directly from the teachings of Muhammad. His example, as well as the legal and ethical frameworks he established, have provided a comprehensive system for governing personal and communal life. The principles of justice, equity, and fairness found in Islamic law are rooted in his teachings and continue to guide the legal systems in many Muslim-majority countries. While interpretations of Sharia may vary, the foundation of justice, charity, and equality remains firmly rooted in the Prophet's vision. As Islam spread across the globe, it encountered different cultures and societies, adapting and integrating with local customs while retaining the core teachings of the Prophet. Today, Islam is a religion practiced by over 1 billion people across the world, and Muhammad's influence continues to resonate in diverse cultural contexts. His message of peace, submission to God, and social justice is as relevant today as it was in the 7th century. After the death of Prophet Muhammad in 632 CE, one of the most pressing concerns for the early Muslim community was the preservation of the Quran. The Quran, as the revealed word of God, was the central guide for Muslims, dictating their beliefs, actions, and laws. However, the Quran had been revealed over a period of 23 years, and its verses were memorized by many of Muhammad's companions, but not yet compiled into a single definitive written text. The death of the Prophet and the loss of many of the memorizers of the Quran, especially after the Battle of Yamamah, underscored the urgent need to compile the Quran into a single book. This task was monumental, as it involved not only ensuring the accuracy of the text, but also safeguarding its integrity for future generations. The first steps in the preservation of the Quran were taken by the first caliph Abu Bakr shortly after the Prophet's death. During the Battle of Yamamah, many of the Quran's memorizers, or hufaz, were killed in battle. This loss highlighted the risk that the Quran could be lost, especially if the memorization of its verses was not systematically preserved. Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second caliph, was deeply concerned about this and urged Abu Bakr to take immediate action to compile the Quran in written form. Abu Bakr initially hesitated, fearing that such an act might not be in accordance with the Prophet's teachings, but after consulting with key companions, including Zayd ibn Thabit, the Prophet's scribe, he agreed to undertake the project. Zayd ibn Thabit, who had served as the Prophet's personal scribe and had memorized much of the Quran, was appointed to lead the effort. Zayd's task was daunting. He had to collect the Quranic verses, which were revealed in various circumstances, on different occasions, and through various means. Some of the verses had been written on scraps of parchment, leather, or stones, while others were only committed to memory by the Prophet's companions. Zayd's meticulous approach involved verifying each verse's authenticity by cross-referencing written records with the memories of those who had memorized the Quran. Zayd, along with other trusted companions, worked tirelessly to gather and compile the Quranic verses, ensuring that the final manuscript was accurate and complete. Once Zayd had gathered all the pieces of the Quran, the compilation was reviewed by the companions who had either memorized or written portions of the Quran themselves. This careful verification process was crucial to ensure that the Quran was compiled without error. The compiled Quran was then stored with Abu Bakr, and after his death, it was passed on to the second caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab, and later to his daughter Hafsa, who kept it safe. The preservation of the Quran was not only a physical act of collecting and compiling the verses, but also an intellectual effort to ensure that the meaning of the text remained intact. The Quran's preservation was based on strict standards of authenticity, with the companions' knowledge and memorization forming the backbone of this effort. This collective responsibility for the preservation of the Quran is one of the most significant aspects of its transmission. Muhammad had ensured that his companions would play a vital role in safeguarding the Quran through their memorization and their commitment to preserving its integrity. During the caliphate of Uthman ibn Affan, the third caliph, the Quran's preservation was taken a step further. As Islam spread rapidly beyond the Arabian Peninsula, different dialects and regional variations of the Quran began to emerge. To prevent confusion and ensure uniformity, Uthman ordered that copies of the Quran be made from the original manuscript compiled under Abu Bakr's direction. These copies were then distributed to various regions of the Islamic Empire, and Uthman ordered the destruction of any other versions that might cause division or confusion among Muslims. This standardized text, known as the Mushaf al-Uthmani, became the definitive version of the Quran, and its uniformity has been preserved to this day. Uthman's efforts were critical in ensuring the Quran's survival, as it set the stage for the preservation of the Quran as a fixed text, unchanged and consistent across the Islamic world. The Quran's preservation was further ensured through a combination of written manuscripts, oral transmission, and memorization. To this day, Muslims continue to memorize the Quran, and it is common for children and adults alike to learn it by heart, maintaining the tradition established by the early Muslims. The preservation of the Quran has also had profound theological significance. For Muslims, the Quran is not just a book, but the literal word of God, revealed through the angel Jibril to the Prophet Muhammad. Its preservation in its original form is seen as a miraculous act, ensuring that the message of Islam remains unchanged and relevant for all time. The Quran's preservation is considered an act of divine will, and the fact that it has remained unchanged for over 1,400 years is viewed as a sign of God's protection over his message. The Quran itself declares, "Indeed, it is we who sent down the Quran, and indeed, we will be its guardian." Quran 15.9, affirming the belief that God himself has ensured the Quran's integrity. The preservation of the Quran also has a direct impact on the way it is understood and applied in daily life. Since the text has remained unchanged, it continues to serve as a timeless guide for Muslims, providing answers to questions of ethics, law, spirituality, and personal conduct. The Quran's verses are recited in prayers, and its guidance is sought in matters of both personal and community life. At the heart of Islam are two core theological concepts that form the foundation of the faith: tawheed, the oneness of God, and risalah, prophethood. These principles, which are central to the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, not only define the relationship between humanity and God, but also serve as the guiding framework for how Muslims understand their purpose in life, their actions, and their duties toward others. Muhammad's life and mission were devoted to emphasizing these core concepts, shaping a worldview that placed the worship of one God at the center of existence and recognized the role of the Prophet as the final messenger of God to guide humanity toward righteousness. Tawheed, the oneness of God. The concept of Tawheed is the most fundamental principle in Islam, encapsulating the belief that there is only one God, Allah. This is not merely a theological assertion, but a worldview that shapes every aspect of Islamic thought and practice. Tawheed asserts that God is unique, indivisible, and without partners. He is the creator and sustainer of the universe, and everything in existence, whether human, animal, or natural, exists only through his will. This belief in the oneness of God is expressed in the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. For Prophet Muhammad, Tawheed was the cornerstone of his message. His mission was to call people back to the worship of the one true God, to reject polytheism and the worship of idols that dominated pre-Islamic Arabia. This call to monotheism was not only a rejection of false gods, but also a call to acknowledge God's sovereignty over all aspects of life. Muhammad's rejection of idol worship and his advocacy for the oneness of God were meant to purify society from the divisions and inequalities that arose from polytheism. By emphasizing Tawheed, he sought to create a unified community where God's will, expressed through his teachings, was the supreme guiding force in all matters. The Quran frequently reminds its readers of the oneness of God, warning against associating partners with him, known as shirk. For instance, the Quran states, "Say, He is Allah, who is one, Allah, the eternal refuge. He neither begets nor is born, nor is there to him any equivalent." Quran 112, 1-4. This surah, Al-Ikhlas, encapsulates the essence of Tawheed, emphasizing God's absolute unity and transcendence. Understanding Tawheed leads to a profound sense of humility and submission to God's will, guiding Muslims in their daily lives, reminding them that all power belongs to God alone. Risalah, prophethood. The concept of Risalah refers to the belief in prophethood and the role of messengers sent by God to guide humanity. In Islam, it is believed that God has sent numerous prophets throughout history, each tasked with conveying his message and guiding people toward righteousness. Muhammad, as the final prophet, holds a central position in Islamic belief, and his teachings and actions serve as the ultimate example for Muslims to follow. The importance of Risalah is reflected in the Quran, which states, "We have sent you, O Muhammad, as a mercy to the worlds." Quran 21-107. Muhammad's role as a prophet was not just to relay God's message, but to embody it through his character and actions. His life is seen as a living example of how to implement the divine will on earth. The message Muhammad conveyed was the same message sent through earlier prophets like Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. But Muhammad's message was the final and complete revelation, designed to guide humanity for all time. The concept of Risalah also underscores the idea that prophets were human beings chosen by God, endowed with wisdom and piety, but not divine themselves. Muhammad, like all prophets before him, was a servant of God. He received the Quran over a period of 23 years, and it is considered by Muslims to be the final and unaltered word of God, preserved in its original form. Muhammad's teachings, as recorded in the hadith, sayings and actions, further elaborate on his role as a prophet and how Muslims should strive to live according to the values and principles he set forth. In Islamic thought, the belief in prophethood reinforces the importance of divine guidance. The Quran stresses that humanity, in its quest for truth, needs messengers to illuminate the path to salvation. Without divine revelation, people would be left in spiritual darkness, unable to know the true purpose of their lives or how to live in harmony with God's will. The interplay of tawheed and risalah. Together, tawheed and risalah form the dual pillars of Islamic theology. The belief in the oneness of God and the belief in the necessity of prophets go hand in hand. While tawheed directs the Muslim's relationship with God, emphasizing his absolute unity and sovereignty, risalah provides the means by which humans can understand God's will and live righteous lives. The Prophet Muhammad, through his life and message, exemplified the teachings of tawheed and risalah, acting as the model for how to live in accordance with the divine will. The Quran was revealed to him to clarify the path for Muslims, and his sunnah traditions further explained and lived out these principles. Theological implications. The theological concepts of tawheed and risalah have far-reaching implications for Muslims. Tawheed shapes their worldview, defining God as the central focus of all life, with no intermediaries or partners in his divinity. It guides Muslims to worship God alone, seeking his pleasure and striving to live in harmony with his laws. Similarly, risalah provides Muslims with a clear path to follow, embodied in the life of the Prophet Muhammad. His teachings are not only to be respected but actively followed, as his example represents the ideal way to live in accordance with God's will. These two core concepts also influence Islamic law and ethics. The Al-Wakeel. Belief in the oneness of God leads to an emphasis on justice, as God is the ultimate authority in determining right and wrong. The role of the Prophet Muhammad as the final messenger emphasizes the need to adhere to the Quran and the Sunnah as the comprehensive guide to life. The teachings of Prophet Muhammad continue to have a profound influence on the modern world, particularly in Muslim societies where his principles guide spiritual, social, and political life. From his emphasis on justice, equality, and the oneness of God to his focus on community and compassion, Muhammad's impact resonates deeply in contemporary Muslim societies. Even centuries after his death, his teachings continue to shape not only the lives of over 1 billion Muslims, but also the broader global conversation on morality, human rights, and interfaith relations. One of the most significant aspects of Muhammad's enduring impact is his vision of a just and ethical society. His teachings on equality, social justice, and the fair treatment of others, especially the poor, women, and marginalized groups, have inspired countless movements for social reform. Muhammad's insistence on the dignity of all people, regardless of their race, gender, or social status, has left a lasting legacy. His famous declaration in the farewell sermon, "An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor does a non-Arab have any superiority over an Arab. A white has no superiority over a black, nor does a black have any superiority over a white. None have superiority over another except by piety and good action," serves as a powerful reminder of Islam's call for equality and fairness. In modern times, this principle continues to inspire efforts to combat racism and discrimination, both within Muslim societies and across the globe. In addition to his teachings on social justice, Muhammad's emphasis on the rights of women was revolutionary for his time and continues to influence contemporary Islamic thought. Muhammad provided women with rights that were unprecedented in pre-Islamic Arabia, including the right to inheritance, to own property, and to choose their own spouses. He also advocated for the fair treatment of women in marriage, with the famous hadith, "The best of you are those who are the best to their women." These teachings laid the groundwork for greater gender equality within Muslim societies and continue to inspire debates on women's rights and their role in public and private life today. While the practice of these principles has varied across different cultures and time periods, Muhammad's vision of a just and respectful relationship between men and women remains a key part of Islamic discourse on gender equality. The Prophet's influence also extends to the realm of law and governance. The legal principles derived from the Quran and the Sunnah, the Prophet's sayings and actions, form the foundation of Islamic jurisprudence, or fiqh. In many parts of the world, Islamic law continues to be a central aspect of both personal and communal life. Muhammad's emphasis on justice and fairness in legal matters has had a lasting effect on the development of Islamic legal systems, where concepts such as the protection of human dignity, the prevention of harm, and the importance of honesty and transparency remain central. Islamic law advocates for social welfare, including the protection of the poor, orphans, and the weak, echoing Muhammad's vision of a society where justice is not just a theoretical concept, but a practical reality for all members of the community. Perhaps one of the most powerful aspects of Muhammad's legacy is the way in which his example continues to inspire Muslims to strive for moral excellence and spiritual growth. The Prophet's life is seen by Muslims as the ideal example of how to live a righteous life. His humility, kindness, and integrity are qualities that Muslims seek to emulate in their personal and professional lives. Muhammad's focus on personal development, ethics, and his deep commitment to the worship of God continues to shape the way Muslims approach their relationship with God and with each other. His life reminds Muslims that faith is not only about ritual worship, but about how one interacts with the world through acts of kindness, compassion, and justice. The Prophet's teachings have also had a significant impact on the field of education and knowledge. Muhammad's emphasis on learning and acquiring knowledge is captured in his famous saying, "Seeking knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim." This call to seek knowledge continues to shape Muslim educational traditions. From the early establishment of schools and libraries in the Islamic Golden Age to contemporary universities and institutions, the pursuit of knowledge remains a fundamental tenet of Islam. Muhammad's encouragement to seek both religious and worldly knowledge helped foster a culture of intellectual curiosity and scholarship that contributed to advancements in science, mathematics, philosophy, and medicine, many of which influenced both the Islamic world and the West. In the modern context, Muhammad's teachings have also informed political thought and practice, particularly within the framework of shura, consultation, and ijma, consensus. The idea of consultation, central to Muhammad's leadership style, encourages collective decision-making and cooperation. This principle continues to influence political systems in many Muslim-majority countries, where the involvement of the community in governance and decision-making remains a key value. While political systems vary across the Muslim world, the concept of justice, fairness, and the importance of consultation in leadership continue to resonate with Muslims who seek governance rooted in Islamic principles. The enduring impact of Muhammad's teachings also extends beyond the political and social spheres, shaping the global dialogue on interfaith relations and peace. Muhammad's approach to non-Muslims, particularly in his interactions with the Jewish and Christian communities, emphasized respect, cooperation, and coexistence. He engaged in dialogue with people of different faiths, promoting peaceful relations and understanding. His treaty with the Christian community of Najran and his letters to various rulers advocating for the protection of religious minorities reflect his commitment to interfaith harmony. In the modern world, these principles continue to inspire Muslims to engage with people of other faiths with respect and understanding, promoting peace and mutual respect in an increasingly globalized world. Prophet Muhammad's approach to interfaith relations is a key aspect of his legacy, demonstrating his deep commitment to peace, respect, and understanding between different religious communities. In a time when religious and tribal divisions often led to conflict and violence, Muhammad's leadership was grounded in a vision of cooperation and coexistence. His interactions with people of other faiths, particularly Jews, Christians, and others in Arabia, set an example of how to engage in dialogue, build mutual respect, and work towards peaceful coexistence. Muhammad's policies and teachings on interfaith relations remain relevant today, especially in a world that continues to grapple with religious intolerance and conflict. From the early days of his prophethood in Mecca, Muhammad advocated for a peaceful coexistence between Muslims and people of different faiths, One of the first significant interactions Muhammad had with non-Muslims was with the Jewish and Christian communities of Medina after his migration there. Medina was home to several Jewish tribes, as well as Christians, and Muhammad sought to establish a framework where people of different religious backgrounds could live together under the common values of justice, compassion, and mutual respect. The Constitution of Medina, which Muhammad established after his arrival in the city, was one of the first documents to explicitly outline the rights and responsibilities of Muslims and non-Muslims in a shared society. The document emphasized the protection of religious freedom, stating that the Jewish tribes and Muslims were equal partners in the defense of Medina, and that each group had the right to practice their faith without interference. This inclusive approach was groundbreaking in its time, offering protection to religious minorities and ensuring that they were not compelled to abandon their beliefs. The agreement recognized the diversity of the city and created a model for peaceful coexistence. One of the most notable examples of Muhammad's approach to interfaith relations was his respect for the people of the book, the Jews and Christians. In the Quran, these communities are recognized as having received divine scriptures, and their followers are afforded special status in Islamic law. Muhammad's relationship with the Jewish and Christian communities was one of dialogue and respect, even when there were theological disagreements. For example, while Islam's understanding of God and prophethood differed from that of Judaism and Christianity, Muhammad emphasized shared values and commonalities rather than focusing solely on differences. Despite occasional tensions, Muhammad consistently engaged with these communities with kindness and respect. He is reported to have maintained friendly relations with several Jewish tribes in Medina, and there are accounts of him eating and sharing meals with Jewish individuals. On one occasion, when a Jewish man passed away, Muhammad expressed his condolences and attended the funeral, demonstrating his empathy and respect for the religious practices of others. These interactions were grounded in the belief that mutual respect for different religious traditions was essential for the peaceful coexistence of diverse communities. Muhammad's respect for religious diversity also extended to the protection of religious sites. He ensured the safety of churches and synagogues, granting religious minorities the freedom to worship in peace. In a letter sent to the Christian community of Najran, Muhammad wrote, "To those who follow this guidance, I leave the security of God and the protection of his Prophet." This letter not only affirmed the religious rights of the Christians of Najran, but also exemplified Muhammad's commitment to protecting the religious freedoms of all faith communities. Furthermore, Muhammad's teachings on justice and mercy served as a foundation for interfaith relations. His commitment to fairness and compassion extended to people of all faiths, and his principles were clear. No one should be harmed or oppressed because of their beliefs. He warned against forced conversions, famously stating that there is no compulsion in religion. Quran 2:256. This teaching underscores the Islamic view that faith should be a personal and voluntary commitment, rather than something imposed through force or coercion. In his interactions with non-Muslims, Muhammad also emphasized the importance of peaceful dialogue. He believed that disagreements about faith should be addressed with wisdom, patience, and respect, rather than hostility or violence. The Quran advises, "Invite to the way of your Lord with wisdom and good instruction, and argue with them in a way that is best." Quran 16:125. This guidance emphasizes the importance of approaching interfaith discussions with an open heart and mind, aiming for understanding rather than confrontation. Muhammad's approach to interfaith relations also reflected a broader vision of global peace. He recognized that the Abrahamic faiths shared common origins and principles, and he worked to create a framework for cooperation that would transcend religious boundaries. His efforts laid the groundwork for the concept of dhimmi, which allowed non-Muslims to live under the protection of the Islamic State, practicing their faith freely in exchange for paying a tax, the jizya. This system was based on the principle of tolerance and mutual respect, offering religious minorities protection and the ability to practice their faith without fear of persecution. Muhammad's emphasis on religious tolerance is particularly relevant today, in a world that often struggles with religious and sectarian conflicts. His example shows that it is possible for different faith communities to coexist peacefully, respecting one another's beliefs while working together for the common good. His teachings on interfaith relations continue to resonate in the modern world, offering a model for peaceful dialogue and coexistence. Prophet Muhammad's leadership was not only political and spiritual, but also deeply rooted in ethics and morality. His teachings emphasized values such as honesty, integrity, humility, and compassion, which continue to serve as a guide for Muslims today. Muhammad's character was a model of these virtues, and his life exemplified the ethical principles that Islam seeks to instill in its followers. As a moral leader, Muhammad's example shaped the early Muslim community and provided a timeless standard for how Muslims should interact with others, govern themselves, and live their lives in accordance with God's will. One of the most central aspects of Muhammad's moral leadership was his unwavering commitment to honesty and truthfulness. From his earliest years, Muhammad was known as Al-Amin, meaning the trustworthy, a title given to him because of his reputation for honesty and integrity. Even before his prophethood, he was respected by both Muslims and non-Muslims alike for his fair dealings and truthful nature. His commitment to truthfulness became even more evident during his prophetic mission, when he preached not only about the oneness of God, but also about the importance of being truthful in all matters. He said, "Truth leads to righteousness, and righteousness leads to paradise," highlighting the central place that truth holds in Islam. Muhammad's own life was an embodiment of this commitment to honesty. He was forthright in his dealings with others, even when the truth was difficult or when it might have put him at a disadvantage. He never concealed his message, even when facing persecution from the Quraysh or when challenged by the complexities of leadership. His honesty in conveying the Quranic revelations was steadfast, and his actions were consistent with the values he preached. He demonstrated that being truthful was not just a matter of words, but was reflected in one's actions, decisions, and relationships with others. Alongside honesty, Muhammad placed great importance on integrity, particularly in his role as a leader. He led by example, always striving to do what was right, even when it required personal sacrifice. His integrity was evident in his decisions, whether in times of peace or war. For instance, during the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, despite the apparent concessions made to the Quraysh, Muhammad stayed true to his word, understanding the long-term benefits of the agreement for the Muslim community. His ability to honor agreements and act with fairness, even when others were deceitful or unjust, reinforced his moral leadership. He showed that true integrity meant upholding one's promises, even in difficult circumstances. Muhammad's humility was another cornerstone of his moral leadership. Despite his role as the final prophet and the leader of a growing Muslim community, he never allowed power or status to cloud his sense of humility. He lived simply, often in modest conditions, and did not seek material wealth or recognition. His humility was demonstrated in his daily life. He would engage in manual labor, help with household chores, and eat with his companions. He treated everyone with equal respect, whether they were rich or poor, young or old, free or enslaved. Muhammad's humility was not a passive trait, but an active quality that influenced how he engaged with others. He sought to elevate those around him, ensuring that even the most marginalized members of society were treated with dignity. The Prophet's sense of humility extended to his relationships with his followers, where he treated them as equals. He often expressed gratitude to his companions and acknowledged their contributions, even for the smallest acts of kindness. His humility also meant that he was open to the advice of his companions, never considering himself above consultation. Despite being the final messenger of God, Muhammad sought the input of his companions in matters of governance, strategy, and law. This willingness to listen to others, especially when they offered constructive criticism, further illustrated his humility and his belief in the value of collective wisdom. Muhammad's teachings also emphasized the importance of compassion and kindness. He was known for his empathy toward others, particularly toward the poor, the sick, and the oppressed. He encouraged his followers to act with kindness, saying, "He who does not show mercy to others will not be shown mercy." His life was a testament to the practice of mercy, whether it was in forgiving his enemies or in providing for the poor and needy. One of the most significant acts of mercy in his life was his decision to forgive the Quraysh after the conquest of Mecca. Despite the years of persecution, he granted amnesty to his former enemies, saying, "Go, for you are free," exemplifying the high moral standard he set for himself and his followers. Another key ethical value that Muhammad emphasized was justice. He taught that justice should prevail in all aspects of life, from personal relationships to governance. He spoke out against all forms of injustice, whether it involved oppression of the weak, the poor, or women. In his famous statement from the farewell sermon, Muhammad declared, "All people are equal. No one has superiority over another except by piety and good deeds," highlighting that justice in Islam was not only about legal fairness, but about moral righteousness. Muhammad's commitment to justice was not only theoretical, but practical, as he led by example in his fair treatment of all individuals, regardless of their social status. Through these teachings, honesty, integrity, humility, compassion, and justice, Muhammad laid the foundation for the ethical framework of Islam. His personal conduct became the standard by which Muslims were to measure their own actions, and his moral leadership provided the community with a blueprint for how to live righteous lives in accordance with God's will. Muhammad's leadership was not just a matter of political power, but of moral and spiritual guidance. He demonstrated that true leadership is based on character, and that morality should be at the heart of every decision, whether in personal life, community affairs, or governance. Prophet Muhammad's life was a reflection of the highest ethical standards. His teachings emphasized a deep sense of moral responsibility, and he encouraged his followers to embody virtues such as kindness, charity, fairness, and integrity. These ethical principles were not just theoretical ideals, but were actively practiced by Muhammad and his companions, setting a standard for personal and social behavior that would define Islamic civilization for centuries to come. The moral guidance he provided through his words and actions continues to resonate today, influencing not only Muslims but also people of various faiths around the world who admire his exemplary character. One of the core ethical teachings of Muhammad was the emphasis on kindness and compassion. Muhammad often spoke of kindness as a key aspect of faith, stating, "The best among you are those who are the most kind and compassionate." His actions were consistent with this teaching. He was gentle with children, considerate of the elderly, and even forgiving toward his enemies. One of the most significant examples of his kindness is how he treated those who opposed him during the early years of his prophethood. Despite the suffering and persecution he endured at the hands of the Quraysh, Muhammad forgave many of his former persecutors when he conquered Mecca, offering them amnesty and saying, "Go, for you are free." His ability to extend mercy, even to those who had wronged him, reflects the profound depth of his ethical character. In addition to kindness, charity played a central role in Muhammad's ethical teachings. As the ultimate example of generosity, Muhammad emphasized that giving to those in need was one of the most important acts of worship. He said, charity does not decrease wealth, underscoring the belief that acts of kindness and giving enrich the giver spiritually, even if it costs them materially. He was known for his generous spirit, giving away whatever wealth he had to those who were less fortunate. This included his personal possessions, and he would often give away his own food, clothing, and money to those in need. His life exemplified the Islamic teaching that wealth is a trust from God and should be used to benefit others, especially the poor, orphans, and widows. Muhammad's teachings on charity went beyond mere donations of material goods. He also emphasized the importance of kindness in everyday interactions. For example, he taught that a smile was a form of charity, saying, "Your smile for your brother is a form of charity." This teaching reflects a broader understanding of charity in Islam, one that includes not just financial support, but also acts of kindness, love, and positive interaction. Muhammad encouraged Muslims to give freely, not only to the poor, but also to others in their communities, regardless of their status or religion. Another key ethical principle Muhammad instilled in his followers was fairness. He taught that justice should be upheld in all circumstances, and that every individual, regardless of their status or wealth, deserved to be treated equally before the law. His sense of fairness extended to the treatment of women, children, and slaves, populations that were often marginalized in pre-Islamic societies. Muhammad's emphasis on equality before the law can be seen in his decision to ensure that even the most powerful individuals were held accountable for their actions. One of his most famous sayings is, "If my own daughter had stolen, I would have cut off her hand," highlighting the importance of fairness and the idea that justice must be blind to status and privilege. Muhammad's ethical teachings also emphasized personal integrity. He was known for his honesty, which earned him the title Al-Amin, the trustworthy, even before he became a prophet. Muhammad's commitment to truth was unwavering, and he instilled the same values of honesty and integrity in his followers. He encouraged them to always speak the truth, even when it was difficult or when it would put them at a disadvantage. His teachings on integrity extended to all aspects of life, including business transactions, where he emphasized the importance of fair trade and mutual respect in economic dealings. He said, "The truthful and trustworthy merchant is with the prophets, the truthful, and the martyrs," reinforcing the idea that honesty in business is a virtuous act in the sight of God. Humility was another fundamental ethical teaching of Muhammad. Despite his position as the prophet and leader of a growing state, Muhammad lived a simple life. He wore modest clothing, ate simple food, and often shared his meals with those in need. His humility was evident in his interactions with others. He was known to serve those around him, whether it was helping his wives with household chores or assisting his companions in their work. He avoided seeking power or wealth, and he never allowed his status to separate him from the people he served. His humility also extended to his leadership style, which was inclusive and consultative. Muhammad regularly sought the counsel of his companions and treated them with respect, regardless of their social standing. Muhammad's ethical teachings were not only about personal conduct, but also about creating a just and moral society. He advocated for the protection of the vulnerable, including orphans, the poor, and women. His laws and guidance emphasized the importance of safeguarding the rights of all individuals, ensuring that no one was oppressed or exploited. The Quran, which Muhammad conveyed, repeatedly calls for justice and fairness, urging Muslims to stand up for the rights of the oppressed and to act with integrity in all aspects of life. O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm in justice, witnesses for Allah, even if it be against yourselves or parents and relatives. Quran 4:135. Muhammad's teachings and the Quranic injunctions established the moral framework for a society based on justice, mercy, and equity. The final days of Prophet Muhammad's life marked a deeply emotional and reflective period for both him and his companions. After more than 2 decades of tireless work, guiding the Muslim community through immense challenges and triumphs, Muhammad's health began to deteriorate. Despite his declining physical condition, he remained the unwavering leader, mentor, and spiritual guide for his followers, and his final days were a profound reflection of the principles he had lived by throughout his life: humility, patience, and devotion to his mission. It was during the final months of his life that Muhammad fell seriously ill. The illness began after he had led the Hajj pilgrimage in 632 CE, and as his condition worsened, he experienced a high fever and weakness that prevented him from performing many of his daily activities. Despite his deteriorating health, Muhammad continued to lead the Muslim community as best as he could, relying on his trusted companions for support. His illness was a source of great concern for the Muslims, and many of his companions gathered around him, hoping for his swift recovery and seeking his counsel. The Prophet's final days were filled with a sense of reflection and a deep awareness of the significance of his mission. During this time, he called his closest companions, such as Abu Bakr, Umar, and Ali, to discuss matters related to the future of the Muslim community. His thoughts were primarily focused on ensuring that the unity of the Ummah, Muslim community, would continue after his passing. The Prophet's commitment to his community was evident even in his final moments, as he gave clear instructions on how the Muslims should behave and who should lead them after his death. One of the most significant moments during his final days occurred when he requested to address the Muslim community. In his weak condition, Muhammad was carried to the mosque, where he delivered a final sermon to the believers. In this brief but powerful address, he emphasized the importance of maintaining unity, following the guidance of the Quran and his teachings, and adhering to the ethical principles that he had instilled in them throughout his life. He reminded the Muslims to uphold the values of justice, compassion, and mercy, and to continue the work of spreading Islam to the far corners of the earth. Despite his physical weakness, Muhammad's words carried great weight. His companions, who had stood by him through the most difficult trials, listened intently, recognizing that this was the final guidance they would receive from their beloved prophet. In this moment, Muhammad's enduring influence was clear. His concern for his community, his unwavering commitment to God's will, and his desire for peace and justice would continue to guide the Muslim community long after he had passed. As his illness progressed, Muhammad's physical state became more fragile. He was no longer able to lead prayers, and his role as the head of the Muslim state was effectively handed over to his closest companions, especially Abu Bakr. During one of the final days of his life, Muhammad asked Abu Bakr to lead the prayers in his place, a decision that would later have significant implications for the leadership of the Muslim community. The decision to appoint Abu Bakr as the leader of the prayers was seen as a symbolic gesture, foreshadowing his role as the first caliph after the Prophet's death. Throughout this time, Muhammad's companions were deeply affected by his illness. The emotional bond between the Prophet and his followers had always been one of deep love and respect, and as the end drew near, the companions could not help but feel the weight of the impending loss. The Quranic revelations, which had been a source of guidance and comfort for them, took on even greater significance as they sought solace in the words of God and in the legacy of their beloved Prophet. In his final days, Muhammad expressed his longing to meet with his Creator, as he knew that his time in this world was coming to an end. The Prophet's faith in God's will, his patience in the face of illness, and his unwavering devotion to his mission remained a source of inspiration for those around him. As he lay in his final moments, Muhammad was surrounded by his family, close companions, and the members of the Muslim community who had been touched by his message. The Prophet's death, when it came, was a deeply sorrowful moment for the Muslim world. Muhammad passed away on the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal in 632 CE, leaving behind a community that had been transformed by his teachings and leadership. His death marked the end of an era, but his legacy would continue to shape the Muslim community and the world for centuries to come. The passing of Prophet Muhammad in 632 CE marked the end of an era for the Muslim community, a moment of profound sorrow and reflection. For his companions, his death was a personal loss, a heartbreaking moment that brought a deep sense of grief and uncertainty. Muhammad had been their spiritual leader, their guide and their example. His presence had illuminated their path, and now they were faced with the daunting task of continuing his mission without him. Yet, despite the profound sadness that gripped the hearts of his companions, the death of Muhammad did not bring an end to his message. Instead, it marked the beginning of a new chapter in the history of Islam, as the companions and the early Muslim community took up the mantle of leadership and continued to spread the teachings of their beloved Prophet. The moment of the Prophet's death was a deeply emotional one for his companions. Many of them were overwhelmed with grief and disbelief as the reality of his passing began to settle in. Abu Bakr, one of Muhammad's closest companions and the first person to embrace Islam after Khadija, was one of the first to take action in the wake of the Prophet's death. As the community gathered in mourning, Abu Bakr, with a calm and composed demeanour, addressed the Muslims, saying, "If anyone worships Muhammad, let him know that Muhammad is dead. But if anyone worships Allah, let him know that Allah is alive and never dies." This declaration helped to refocus the community's attention on the eternal nature of God and the continuity of the mission of Islam, even after the Prophet's death. Abu Bakr's words reflected a central truth in Islam. While Muhammad was the final messenger, the mission of spreading God's word and implementing his will continued through the community of believers. Muhammad's death, though a moment of personal loss for his followers, did not signal the end of Islam's message. His teachings, preserved in the Quran and the hadith, continued to guide the community, and the companions understood that they had a collective responsibility to ensure that his mission would live on. The first major task that the early Muslim community faced after Muhammad's death was the selection of a leader to succeed him. The question of leadership became a pivotal moment in Islamic history, one that would shape the future of the Muslim state. After much consultation, the companions selected Abu Bakr as the first caliph leader of the Muslim community. His appointment was based on his deep piety, his close relationship with Muhammad, and his role in the early spread of Islam. Abu Bakr's leadership was essential in maintaining the unity of the Muslim community and in preserving the integrity of the teachings of Islam. Abu Bakr's caliphate marked the beginning of the Rashidun Caliphate, the first period of Islamic rule following the death of the Prophet. Under his leadership, the Muslim community consolidated its position in the Arabian Peninsula, successfully overcoming the Ridda Wars, which were a series of rebellions by tribes that had renounced Islam after Muhammad's death. Abu Bakr's firm leadership helped to restore order and unity, ensuring that the community remained united in its commitment to the teachings of Islam. His leadership, based on the principles of justice, piety, and humility, set the standard for future caliphs and ensured the continuity of the Prophet's mission. Even after Muhammad's death, his influence continued to shape the lives of his companions and the direction of the Muslim community. The companions, having been taught directly by the Prophet, became the first generation of Islamic scholars and leaders, passing down his teachings to future generations. The Quran, preserved in its entirety, remained the ultimate guide for the Muslim community, while the hadith, the collection of the sayings and actions of the Prophet, served as a valuable source of guidance for personal conduct, legal rulings, and social relationships. In the years following the Prophet's death, the Muslim community continued to expand rapidly. Under the leadership of the first four caliphs, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, the Islamic State grew from a small city-state in Medina into a vast empire stretching from the Iberian Peninsula in the west to India in the east. The teachings of Muhammad, embedded in the Quran and his example, guided the governance, military strategies, and social policies of the early Islamic State. The unity of the Muslim community, fostered by the Prophet's emphasis on brotherhood and shared faith, enabled the Muslims to overcome challenges and to establish one of the largest empires in history. Despite the political divisions and challenges that arose after Muhammad's death, his message of justice, mercy, and monotheism remained central to the identity of the Muslim community. The Prophet's vision of a just and compassionate society continued to inspire Islamic leaders and thinkers throughout the centuries, shaping Islamic law, philosophy, and ethics. His teachings on social justice, equality, and the rights of women laid the foundation for a society where the principles of fairness and kindness were paramount, and these values continue to be central to the Muslim worldview today. The passing of Prophet Muhammad did not mark the end of his legacy. Rather, it was the beginning of an enduring journey for his followers. The companions who had witnessed his life, learned from him, and stood by him in times of hardship took on the responsibility of carrying forward the message of Islam. Their dedication to preserving the teachings of the Prophet, their commitment to spreading the message of Islam, and their efforts to uphold the principles of justice and mercy have ensured that Muhammad's legacy remains as relevant today as it was in the 7th century.